Good morning, Anand. Over here, I am Assistant Professor of Law, Vivekananda School of Law and Legal Studies, New Delhi, in the gracious presence of Professor Dr. Venkata Rao Sir, Chairperson, VSLLS and VSES VIPS, Professor Dr. T.V. Shubha Rao Sir, Professor Emeritus at VSSLS, and our Dean, Professor Dr. Rashmi Salpekar Ma'am. Like to welcome all the teaching and research fraternity on the 5th day of online FDP program organized by VSLLS. Yesterday we had 3 technical sessions in which we had the privilege to listen to Professor V. Sudesh, who spoke on teaching technique to teach legal laws. Professor Sudesh started the technical session explaining that teaching job is not mechanical job. A teacher is working throughout their life. Sir gave the glimpse of foundational understanding of labor law. He threw light on Indian labor law and codification of rights of labor law, mentioning that legislations can be categorized in 4 categories. He also expounded on whether labor rights are human rights and referring to the current situations of migrant workmen. According to him, labor rights must be seen in the larger context of human rights. Labor rights are entitlements that relate specifically to the role of being worker. Some rights are exercised individually and some collectively. With regard to the techniques to teach labor laws, Professor Sudesh gave 3 approaches: political approach, philosophical approach, and a pragmatic approach. Labor law at any point of time is both the product and the component of struggles between interests of society. The current situation of migrant laborers is an example of this. Sir also emphasized that few points every teacher teaching labor law must adhere to. First of all, to discuss constitutional provisions with regard to labor laws, developing teaching module in labor laws, to discuss importance of cases on which entire labor law jurisprudence is based, dynamics of judicial process which demonstrates the struggles of laborers. Labor law teacher must not allow the importance of labor law to vanish. Referring to the current plight of migrant workmen, Sir pointed out that the main problem is that no data prepared on migrant workmen by the authorities. He also put stress that the current laws can be helpful only if registration of the migrant workmen is done. Currently, there are 44 around labor laws in the country, which government wants to streamline. Professor Sudesh concluded by explaining that worker rights are human rights. And then after that, in the technical session, we had the great opportunity to gain knowledge from Professor Dr. Usha Tandon Ma'am, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. She spoke on the topic interdependency of research and teaching. Professor Usha Tandon divided the discussion on the topic in 3 categories: teaching, learning, and research. Ma'am specifically emphasized that the main purpose of teaching is to make students understand the subject. She pointed out 2 main ingredients of good teaching. They are, first of all, good knowledge of the subject, and then good communication skills and transmitting of the knowledge. Speaking on knowledge, she said that learning is an essential part of knowledge. Learning means updated with the laws, change in laws, new laws introduced, and study of case laws. Law teachers need to teach the subject in its context. We need to develop a teaching technique, and this depends on primarily 2 factors. First is the nature of the subject we are going to teach, and second, the number of students we are going to deal with in our class. Moving on learning, she opined that learning is a constant process and a teacher should always be well versed with the latest developments. Talking on research, Professor Tandon said that legal research primarily investigates any legal issue that may be relating to the already available law, judgment delivered by the judiciary, and anything on which law is not there. Besides doctrinal and non-doctrinal research, ma'am categorized the research in explanatory, exploratory, and critical research. And whenever a researcher wants to write a research article, he has two questions. First of all, to choose the research problem, and the second, to choose the type of research. And the answer of these two questions lies in the area of research. Then, in answering to the question of interdependency of research and teaching, Professor Tandon said that it is more important in LLM and PhD students. LLB students are more into the learning of subject, but as learning is a continuous process for a law teacher, and main role of law teacher is to demonstrate all the ideologies to the students. Research is important for the teachers for their personal and professional growth as a teacher. After that, in the last technical session yesterday, we had Dr. K. Parmeshwaran, Associate Professor, Gujarat National University, Gandhinagar, with us, who spoke on the distinctive topic practical application of spirituality and its values in education, research, and teaching practices. Throwing light on the importance of spirituality, Dr. Parmeshwaran said, in this unseen crisis of COVID-19, we need to think differently. We need to see that changed scenario and the necessities of education and research. There are two values of education and research, which we can say social values and economic values. And education plays a very important role for the humanity to achieve. And here comes the role of spirituality. Sir also pointed out that spirituality is not running away from life as it is generally understood. But according to scriptures, it consists of following elements. Some elements like life enhancing, world embracing, peace building, collective harmonizing, problem solving, and overall development of humans. Spirituality is awakening to greater reality other than mind, emotion, sense, and body. In regard to the practical application of spirituality and its values in education, research, and teaching practices, Sir expressed some tips for the success, like problem finding solution, subjectivity in research, integration in research and society, and then recommendation on progressive self-empowerment. I believe that we as faculty members really benefited by the word of wisdom of such luminaries. In continuation of 1 week program organized under the guidance of our dean, Professor Dr. Rashmi Salpekar ma'am, today we'll be having 3 technical sessions. Namely, the day will start with the benefits of empirical research in teaching. Then in the second technical session, we learn teaching techniques to teach criminal law, and the last technical session for the day, that is teaching techniques to teach environmental law. So, ma'am, can we start the first technical session of the day?
Yes, it's 11:15. So, shall we begin, Dr. Snehal, or shall we take a few other things? We are 15 minutes before, so I guess Rushti.
Yes, sir.
So let's speak about the emerging challenges for legal education, which are there, and we are very fortunate that many of the faculty members across the country, they have given overwhelming response to this faculty development program. And we can say in the with the all the participants that all the speakers who have come to share with us their knowledge. So somehow they have shared their trade secrets with us. That what exactly secrets they were having while dealing with a particular subject. Since the beginning, like Professor Subarao, he also told all his secrets. Then Professor Aladi, while dealing with that how to teach jurisprudence, that time also he revealed that how he used to start his subject, how he used to deal with the queries and the questions raised by the students. And yesterday, Professor Usha Tandon also, she also revealed her trade secret that what is her approach while dealing with undergraduate students and what is her approach while dealing with the postgraduate students. So because of all these trade secrets, definitely we will be able to have a lot of inputs, and definitely we will be able to implement it in our teaching aspect. So Dr. Snehal is ready over here. And after Dr. Snehal, Professor Bajpai, he will also join. So Dr. Snehal, if you are ready, so can we start? Kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, I can start.
Yeah, my technical moderator, Mr. Suhas. Now she will start sharing her screen.
Is it visible?
One second, it will come.
I have shared.
Yeah, no, it has not come. So just wait.
No.
Then we can introduce our speaker to the
Screen
participants.
share.
Okay, Dr. Snehal will take 1 minute more because my moderator will introduce you
Yes.
to all the participants, and after that we will allow you to share your screen. So just give us 5 minutes more. Yes, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So dear participants, we are starting with the first technical session of the day. That is benefits of empirical research in teaching. I would like to invite Dr. Snehal Fernandez, Principal, Govind Rao Vanjari College of Law, Nagpur. Dr. Snehal is well known for her empirical research. She has done empirical research on refugees, women prisoners, medical-based disposal, and many more. She is BSc, LLB, LLM in international law, and doctorate in law. She has also done a diploma in human rights and cyber law. She was amongst the first batch student of diploma in cyber law when it was just introduced. She has published papers in various research journals and also authored number of books. She has presented papers in various international and national journals. Dr. Snehal ma'am, it's over to you ma'am.
Yes. Is it visible? Screen is shared.
Yes, it is visible.
Oh.
You please start.
Ma'am, if I may just point out one thing, ma'am. Ma'am, at the top you have a particular option slideshow. Can you begin a slideshow of this, ma'am? There is an option at the top, slideshow.
No, not actually, because I will not be reading this.
Okay, ma'am.
Should I start?
Yes, ma'am.
Namaskar. Honorable Professor Dr. Venkat Rao sir, convener of the FDP, Dr. Rashmi, and her team members, co-convener Mr. Aditya, and all participant faculty members. I wish a very pleasant morning to you all. Friends, the topic entrusted to me is benefits of empirical research in teaching, my experiences. It follows that I have some experiences about empirical teaching and empirical research and also teaching. So I would be sharing all these experiences with you. Of course, some of them and how I taken the empirical research and what difficulties I had to face, and how and in what ways I have been benefited by these experiences while teaching various law subjects to my students. For the sake of better understanding, I have divided this speech into three parts. One is the meaning and content of empirical research. Another is the need of empirical research in law profession, and the third one is applicability of empirical research in teaching and learning process in law. Now, before going ahead, let's have a look at the meaning of legal education, because ultimately we are talking about the law teaching. So legal education is a science which imparts knowledge of certain principles and provisions of law to enable them to enter the legal profession. The main function of legal education is to produce lawyers with social vision. In modern times, legal education should not only produce lawyers, it should be regarded as a legal instrument for a social change. According to Justice Krishna Iyer, as he rightly put, profession of law is a noble calling, and the members of the legal profession occupy a very high status in the society. So law is the foundation of every society, and it develops abiding citizens, lawyers, academicians, and aspiring judges. And therefore, we must inculcate the social values among our students who are future lawyers and law professionals. When we look into the objectives of legal education, we see that there is a close link or connection between law and society. So legal education develops the perceptions and to understand the problems of one society and to influence values and attitudes. To generate different kinds of skills and knowledge needed for the tasks in the society, it broadens the opportunity and mobility in society, notably among groups who may have been deprived and depressed, and and to develop research of value to educate the society with use of educational facilities. So legal education not only produces efficient lawyers, but also creates law-abiding citizens with human values and rights. The the modern sociological thought in jurisprudence has established beyond doubt that law is an instrument of social control. The aim of legal education should not only to produce lawyers, but should be regarded as a legal instrument for social design. It should aim at furnishing skills and competence among students for creation and maintenance of just order in the society. The reason why I am telling these aims and objectives of legal education is because it is the duty of law teachers to produce quality lawyers, judges, policy makers, etc. to serve the society. To imbibe amongst them values, morality, and good sense of humanity is very important to imbibe so that they could be the protectors of society and of societal values. Theoretically speaking, the lawman has to gain insight of the policy of law mainly from traditional legal material. In actual practice, however, policy goals could scientifically be investigated only through the social science techniques, and the law professional must bring the balance between these two systems so that he could be able to serve the society in a better manner. Now, to accomplish these aims and objectives, a teacher has to develop some techniques, and law teacher has to develop some techniques because of following reasons which I have just summarized subject. The teacher has to make clear about the subject, so the teacher must be well versed in that subject. He must be well read in that particular subject to connect with the students. To connect with the students is very important aspect, because then only students start taking interest in that particular subject. Because many times we see that in law there are some subjects which are what we call as the dry subjects. So even these dry subjects should be made interesting by the teacher with these techniques. Then to make them understand various aspects of the subject concerned. There are so many aspects of the one particular subject can be taught from these different perspectives. One particular law can be taught from different perspectives. So teacher must do that, so that the students, the confidence is built among students, and make it interesting for students, which is again very important, that students can learn that particular subject. Now, in addition to these techniques, teacher has to do some experiments in teaching learning process that is based on his knowledge and expertise. And this knowledge and expertise is developed through a systematic research. A teacher who is a keen researcher, not necessary that every teacher is a researcher or every researcher is a teacher, but a teacher who is a keen researcher can make the subject more and more interesting, because when he does the research, it is the scientific search for knowledge, it is the systematic search for information, it is the search for knowledge from unknown to unknown, and it is an art of scientific investigation. The research always aims at creation of knowledge, assimilation of new knowledge, examination of facts, verification of facts or existing knowledge, and it aims at trying to find out certain solution. So every research begins with a problem and aims with the solution to that problem. If there is no problem, there is no research. So first, this is the journey from problem to the solution of problem. And this entire journey, a researcher or the teacher is gaining some or the other things and improving his research and legal acumen. Now, legal research is different from other social science researches. Um, it is the systematic understanding, investigation of matters concerned with law, such as codes or acts, constitution, treatises, convention, propositions, etc. It is a systematic research into facts of social, political, and economic conditions which give rise to the individual rules, acts, or codes. And it is the examination of socio-legal and other effects of those acts, rules, or codes. Now, for undertaking this research, what I told you, that it is a journey from formulation of problem to finding the solution of problem. So to carry out this journey, we have to think for some methods, develop some research methods, and it is called as the research methodology. Research methodology is a systematic way to solve a problem. It is a science of studying how research is to be carried out. Essentially, the procedures by which researchers go about their work of describing, explaining, and predicting phenomena are called research methodology. It is also defined as the study of methods by which knowledge is gained. Its aim is to give the work plan of the research. Now, broadly speaking, there are two types of research. You see, law is a normative science. That is a science which lays down norms and standards for human behavior in a specified situation or situations which are enforceable through sanction of the state. This normative character distinguishes law social science because of the simple fact that it regulates human conduct and relationship between law and society. Now, broadly speaking, there are two types of researches, doctrinal and non-doctrinal research. I will not go into the technical details of these two methods because that is not the topic for today's discussion. Doctrinal method, broadly speaking, it involves analysis of case laws, arranging and ordering systematically the existing legal material. It is the study of existing legal doctrines. And whereas non-doctrinal research is based on the premise that law is an instrument of social change. It originates and functions in the society. Law and society are two sides of one coin. The lawyer must know much about the sociology, and the sociologist must know much about the law. Sources of doctrinal research are conventional legal sources, textbooks, case laws, statutes, enactments, periodicals, websites, reports of the committee, judgments, commentaries, etc. Whereas sources of non-doctrinal are questionnaire, interviews, observation, focus group discussion, etc. But what I experienced is both these methods, they complement each other. Actually, law and social, if we undertake the socio-legal research, a strong doctrinal base is required. It cannot work on the weak doctrinal base, though it is a socio-legal research. These two methods or techniques, we can say, are not opposite of each other, but they complement each other. Let me explain this first, because ultimately I have to focus on non-doctrinal or empirical research. Law, as we say, is a normative science which lays down rules as to how human beings ought to behave. Its norms are prescriptive and in no sense descriptive of human behavior. The latter is the domain of sociology. It is for the sociologist to observe behavior of individual in a society. However, in his search of prescriptive norms, a lawman turns to traditional legal material, namely statutes and decisions. He is uninterested in the observance of actual behavior of the individual in the society. These prescriptive rules found by him has legitimacy of origin descended from legal sources and not that actually being observed by members of the community. Empirical research in law was not very common in India, Indian legal research, but since last 2-3 decades it has got momentum. Still, many legal scholars are confused over its value. Some advocate it, some are against it, whereas some are neutral or confused over its efficacy. I belong to the first category, having inclined towards a study of legal facts rather than legal rules, combined with human facts. I started believing that legal research could be more lively, more exciting, more interesting and purposeful. I have done many empirical researches, and I encouraged my students to undertake the empirical research for their PhD and for their teaching purposes also. The empirical there are main features of empirical research. It helps to build our theoretical understanding of law as a social and political phenomena and contributes to the development of social theory. Next feature is it helps us to understand the law better. On an empirical understanding of the law in action helps us to understand society in more better manner. It has so many benefits in teaching and learning process in law. For example, we can teach the principle of being neutral during when lawyers, when clients come to a lawyer, he has to be neutral. A judge has to be a unbiased nature. Then it improves the thinking ability of students. It improves the overall approach of students. So all these qualities we can teach to our students, which we gain from the empirical research. first we'll see the advantage of empirical research. It gives insight into the subject. Earlier I told that it is from journey from problem to problem solving. So in this journey, every stage gives us some or the other thing, or some or the other benefit, some or the other quality is improved all these stages of research. It gives insight into the subject means when we identify or formulate the problem, which is the very first stage of any research. There are not many problems surrounding us, but to identify a particular problem as a research problem and formulate it as a research problem is a very critical job. And when that researcher is doing this job, then it gives him the insight into that particular subject. Then improves analytical skill and ability for formulating hypothesis, etc. He has to analyze the existing legal material, and hence this skill of and ability of um, analytical study of the existing legal material is increased during this particular process. Then helps through thorough understanding of the subject matter. Now, for any research, whether it is doctrinal or non-doctrinal, a review of literature is a must. So, the researcher, when he before going ahead with his own research, he reviews the existing legal material, the studies of other researchers, so that there should not be duplication or there should not be any just for getting the more and more information as to in what areas the research has been done. So thorough understanding is now of the subject matter is by studying the review of literature. Then imbibe the habit of in-depth.
Nehal ma'am,
Yes?
your network is quite, it's not clear. So is it possible to just do off your video, but however kindly continue with the screen sharing, so we will be able to see your slides and we can continue also. And if possible, if you can start from your earlier slide, because that time network was not very good.
Okay.
You can go to the earlier slide.
Earlier,
Like,
earlier.
you can start with empirical research main features.
Yes.
And you just try if you can switch off your video, and then if you can continue.
Yes, I can.
So it will help.
I can do it. Yes. Just
Yes.
a minute. The audio is
You can just click Alt V, ma'am. Alt plus V.
okay. Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Shall I continue?
Haji ma'am, yes, please.
Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, ma'am. We are able to see the slide.
Just a minute. So these are the advantages of empirical research. Then it inculcates strong desire for research. As I told that research is a journey from unknown to known. So in in this journey unknown, the curiosity about the unknown facts increases, and therefore it gives the researcher the strong desire for the research. Now, it is helpful to lawyers, law teachers, judges, law students, policymakers, academicians, etc. It is not that research should be done only by teachers for getting job, but it is for every legal professional. Research is important. Though there are many advantages of empirical research, uh, it is not the first choice of legal researchers in India, and it is because there are many difficulties that uh, it is because many difficulties they come under the uh, empirical research. Now, first difficulty is getting permission to visit the respondents. Many times, the universe under consideration is a sensitive area, and therefore the permissions it is very difficult to get the permissions to visit the respondents, and visiting respondent is very important aspect of empirical research. Now there are lack of infrastructural facilities. Comparatively, a good infrastructure is required, computers are required, copying machines are required, office is required. So if these infrastructural facilities are lacking, then it becomes another difficulty. Then lack of fund. The empirical research is very expensive, and so it is not it becomes very difficult for the researcher to go ahead. Lack of training. The training of interviewers or researcher is required because when we employ the interviewers for taking interview, they must be trained so that the required data can be collected in its proper format. So this training is very important. Then time consuming. The empirical research is very much time consuming, and lot of patience is required. It is expensive again because if universe is spread over the comparatively big area, then you have to travel, and so the expenses are incurred in that. Then if you have to analyze and interpret the data through some packages like SPSS package or any other like packages, then that also becomes an expensive affair. Then required skilled human resources to interview. The skilled interviewers are required, and the most important one is lack of cooperation from respondent. Anytime the researcher must take into consideration this aspect that many times respondents are not willing, or they are reluctant to cooperate with the interviewer or with the researcher. Uh, they don't want to speak up effectively. They don't want to speak up effectively. They don't want to give their inputs, and so it becomes very difficult, particularly if the studies about rape victims or acid attack victims or HIV infected patients or elderly persons. They are quite reluctant to give the responses. And then this last one, which is the topic of today's discussion, is my research and my experiences. I had, in spite of so many difficulties, empirical research has its own beauty. One who goes through all the stages of empirical research, um, it becomes a rich experience. He becomes the person, the researcher becomes rich in knowledge and experience. It is because you can go at the root of the problem. You have first-hand information of the universe under study, which enriches you in various capacities, and it naturally comes in your teaching. We know teaching and learning is a continuous process. It's like a cycle. I can pass on this knowledge and information to my students. Then in turn, they will use it or pass on to the other students. Or whenever they go, wherever they go after their studies, there are tremendous benefits of empirical study in teaching law subjects. I experienced this when I decided to take up study on refugee women for my PhD long back in the year 1999. I have attended one training program on international humanitarian law and refugee law, and I was moved by the plight of refugees depicted through videos and films over there in that training program. And I decided to do empirical research on this particular topic only. I have withdrawn my earlier registered topic on doctrinal research and enrolled for the new topic with the empirical research. It was pertinently difficult in those days, but I was very firm and it was very Herculean task to get permissions to visit refugee camps situated all over India because my respondents were refugee women and they were residing in refugee camps and settlements all over India. I interviewed 500 refugee women from 9 categories according to their country of origin. So they were naturally they were distributed into various states where the camps or settlements are there. Such type of research teaches us lot many things. It changes entire attitude and perception of looking towards anything, which is the first thing I tell my students. Before going into the field, my thinking and approach about refugees was different. I used to think like a lay person that what is the need for giving asylum to so many persons? Why our government is doing this when our own people are starving, when there are so many people are jobless, there is a poverty, unemployability, illiteracy in our country. Still, refugees are pouring in from various borders, and India is playing the role of big brother to all these refugees and all the neighboring countries. But when I met my respondents and interviewed them, my approach was totally changed. I stayed in New Delhi along with my 4 students, and daily we used to visit Vikashpuri and Janakpuri, where settlements were there. We interviewed Burmese refugee women, Afghanistan refugee women from Sudan, Somalia, Bhutan, and every woman carries a different story with her, and we were literally visibly moved by these stories, and patiently listening to the horrifying stories of refugee women changed me and my thinking. I started thinking like, what is the harm in sharing our land, our responses, our resources with the one who doesn't have anything? No land, no money, no home, no relatives, nothing. They are just fled, fearing persecution, taking few things with them, and they are on the land of another persons. They are not on their own land. So when we preach the principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we should have this much compassion for our fellow human beings. I teach these lessons to my students when I teach human rights or international humanitarian law or refugee law or even constitution. In similar way, the study on rights of widows of farmers who committed suicide in Vidarbha region, this problem is very well spread during last some 10 or more years. And it also takes me to the grassroots level problem of these widows. Normally, a law person will say there are so many constitutional provisions and other laws for protection of women rights, and government has announced packages for compensation to the family of farmers. Then I ask my students, does this package reaches to that particular woman who is distressed? And if in case it reaches, will it suffice the entire life of that widow whose husband has committed suicide because their life was in distress? She doesn't know where to begin, how to begin. She doesn't know whether she has the land in her name or it is mortgaged to landlord or to bank. She knows nothing. and she is now shouldering the responsibility of her family, children, parents, in-laws, etc. So I think teachers must give this insight to students to look at any case from different perspective, and it is possible only when teacher has this perspective, which is gained from empirical research. When I teach rights of accused or prisoners, we teach these rights of accused in constitution, in human rights, even in women's rights. Uh, so the entire prison comes before me because sometimes I conducted research for women in detention. A layman may think that they are criminals and they must be punished, or they are there due to their bad karma. But being researcher, and that too a socio-legal researcher, if I could see the fact as why they have become criminals. Every woman has different story to tell, how they are dragged in flesh trade or in drug trafficking, and then some or the other offense committed by them. The worst part is nobody from her family comes to take note of her when she is in detention. Facilities are there for her children, for their health is taken care of. There is preschool, play schools are there. Efforts for the reformation are also taken. Still, I want that my students should see the both sides of the coin, so that whenever they become lawyers or the counselors or judges, they can give justice to each and every person who is deprived and distressed, and for whom the laws are made. I had an opportunity to study the juvenile homes in the Vidarbha region. I assisted the nominee member of National Human Rights Commission in this research, and it was a research made for National Human Rights Commission. I visited juvenile homes, interacted with the inmates, and realized that though we have a nice piece of legislation for protection of children in general and for juveniles in particular, the Juvenile Justice Act is there, a really beautiful piece of legislation which can protect the protect the juveniles or children who are in conflict of law, or who are in need of care and protection. But the ground reality in the homes, it is juvenile homes are also, shelter homes are also provided under the same act. But the condition of the home and the inmates is really very pathetic when we see it in the juvenile homes. And I found a vast gap between the legislation on one side and actual position of actual situation on the other side. So whenever I teach Juvenile Justice Act to my students, I tell them the shabby conditions of the homes and sufferings of the children. And I also tell them that it is your responsibility or duty, being lawyers, judges, or being law-abiding citizens, to do something for this deprived section of the society. Another research was in the area of trafficking of girls and women. Again, a very shabby state of affairs. And it is not only the cross-border crime, it is committed in our nearby areas, anywhere, everywhere, surrounding us, in small villages, in small cities, in big cities, in metro cities, everywhere the crime of trafficking is committed for. It may be maximum time it is for prostitution, and there are some other aspects of this crime also. The perpetrators are also known persons. They are from the family, friends, close relatives. Maybe many times they are husbands of the women girl. So students must know this ground reality also. In spite of the acts, in spite of the legislations, there is very less or no implementation at all in this particular area, and there are many such type of laws are there, like prenatal diagnostic technique acts is there, dowry act is there. So in such acts there is very less or no implementation at all. Regarding biomedical waste in Vidarbha region, we have studied the hospitals, public and private multi-speciality hospitals in Vidarbha region. And we have the BMW rules, and we know that there are many penalties for and punishments for the non-observance of these rules. And we know that the hospitals and the doctors, they are observing these rules. But what about the implementation? It is very difficult whether the act is implemented and or not. I asked questions to people residing in close locality of the multi-speciality hospitals, and shocked by the pathetic condition they told. Today is the World Environment Day. Ask a question to a person about right to environment, whose day starts with when he rise up early in the morning and gets out of his house for morning walk and sees amputated legs or hands or other body parts and the like things near its surroundings. So what about the right to environment of that particular person? We say that we have many good pieces of legislations on environment. We have Environment Protection Act, we have Air Pollution Act, Water Pollution Act, so many rules, noise pollution rules are there, biomedical waste rules, solid waste rules. But in spite of all these legislative cluster, the right to environment of individual is violated every now and then. Now, I had an opportunity to visit old age homes for the empirical research and got to know many things. This problem was not there earlier, but now it is a very severe problem in the society. And I made up my mind that my students should visit old home at least once during their 3 years or 5 years program, so that they could see what are the laws and what is the implementation and what are the sufferings of the persons, elderly persons particularly. So they must know this side of the coin also. These are a few examples of my empirical research experiences, which I would share today. There are many others, but I don't know that much time is there with me. But the latest I would like to share with you. Of course, it is not any planned research, but when I got to know that many migrant workers are traveling to their hometowns during this lockdown, they are walking for miles together. They are cycling for kilometers to kilometers. They are boarding the buses or the vehicles which are full of risks. And my mind started thinking why they are leaving their places when government is telling them to stay where they are. Government is providing everything, at least claiming to provide everything. And what will they do when they reach their homes? Because there is no employment, because there are no work, they migrated to the different states. But now why they are living and what will they achieve after going to their hometown? So we rely on the news fed by the print or electronic media. We have seen so many interviews of the migrants and the politicization of issue has also been depicted. But what is the ground reality? So I went to one of the shelter homes in Nagpur, where some 60-70 migrant workers were housed for 2 days. I distributed some things of their daily use, like sanitizers, masks, soaps for washing utensils and washing clothes, and oil, shampoo, etc. And while distributing, I started asking questions like, why are you going? Where are you going? What difficulties you face? What will you do there? Will you get jobs over there? Will you come back to join your respective works if the things go normal? And then, on request by NGO, I took my counseling session also about COVID-19 pandemic and how to get through it. I gave them some inputs also. So I have a first-hand information about migrant workers. which I could not have received from media reports. And I can use it whenever I will teach rights of migrant workers to my students. So in short, I would like to tell you that a teacher must have enriched himself or herself with latest events also, because you also must have experienced that students think that teacher knows everything. They can put any question at any point of time, and it may be relevant to to that particular subject or not. But student always think that teacher has the knowledge of all the things, and they can put any question to you. So you must be updated with the latest events taking place surrounding you. So it's my request to the law teachers that engage yourself in empirical research. It will give you a lot of inputs. It will enrich various qualities in research, which would be in turn used while teaching law subjects. Whether you teach personal laws, whether you teach company law or IPR or arbitration, even criminal law, labor law, land laws, cyber laws, in every field or area, empirical research would be done, and which would be useful in teaching law students. I tell you this thing very confidently because law teaching is different from teaching other disciplines. We have to produce students with various different qualities, because they are going to be responsible judges, lawyers, arbitrators, conciliators, uh, corporate lawyers, or even law teachers. So we must also teach them lessons along with laws and legal rules, lessons of being neutral, being unbiased to the client, understanding the ground realities, being patient for case reading technique also, and we can enrich ourselves with these qualities by doing empirical research. I would like to end my speech by a small message that legal education in India is going through a very exciting phase. Though India has largest population of lawyers in the world, there is a need for eminent lawyers. The opportunities for bright law graduates are massive, and the new generation law schools as well as conventional law colleges have a major role, not only to improve the standards of legal education, but take it to the newer heights. Hence, the scenario is becoming more and more specialized as it is envisioned by the well-wishers of legal profession. I once again thank the organizers for giving this opportunity to share my views with you, and special thanks to the wonderful audience for patient hearing. I wish all the very best for your bright future. God bless you. Thank you.
Ma'am, Snehal ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, there are a few questions from the participants.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would read that question.
Snehal ma'am, I request that you please keep on now your video. It will be helpful for us. Kindly start your video, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. Just a minute.
Yes. Yes, Rushti, now you can ask questions.
Snehal ma'am, here's a question from Priyanka Sharda. She is an assistant professor. She wants to know your opinion regarding empirical research in the burning issue of human trafficking, as she is doing research in this issue. So she's asking, so is it possible to get data on this problem by doing field work in human trafficking, ma'am?
Okay. She is doing that doctrinal research, I think.
She is doing empirical research. So she's asking for...
Okay. Okay. See, whenever any research relates to any particular person or human behavior, or any act you study in the context of any particular person for whom the act is made. So empirical research is, I would not say it's a must, because in legal research we most of the times we do doctrinal research, but she can support the doctrinal research with the empirical findings. And data is available with the social department of police stations. So she can get the data, and she can of course convince the officials over there to get the required data, and it is for, she has to convince them that it is for the academic purpose only, and she will not be using it for any other purpose other than the academic purpose. So she would get it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. There is one more question from Manjula Raghav, and he's asking for that in empirical research, what we should mention: research question or hypothesis?
Uh, in fact, both are equally important. Hypothesis is also important, and research questions are important, because you have to develop the questionnaire on the basis of research questions. So it is good to have to develop research questions also.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Then there is one more question from Kanika Dhingra. Kanika Dhingra is asking that is it possible to go for empirical research in all the areas of law, or are there any limitation for some areas where it is not possible to go for an empirical research?
Yes, it's a really very good question. Uh, Almost all areas can be covered under empirical research. But see, in empirical research, you require the data. If you want the field work, then you need the respondents. So there are some areas, like for example, the international law, or the international trade law, or international economic law, where direct respondents are not available. So in that case only you cannot do the research, but otherwise every area there is a possibility of empirical research.
Okay, ma'am. Then Richa Srivastav is there, assistant professor. She is asking how to verify the authenticity of data available online for the purpose of empirical research.
This is again a very good as well as tricky question, because authentication of data which is available online is very difficult, and we cannot rely much upon this type of data, because whenever we personally interview any particular person, so we can get the reliability of that particular data. It becomes very difficult to authenticate this type of data which is available online. If it is possible to cross check, then only you can cross check it.
Okay, ma'am, there are a few more questions as we have few time left. There is Pooja Kanta. She's asking, is it always important to quantify qualitative data, or we can represent qualitative data as it is?
In what type of research that is important? In empirical research, quantification is required, because ultimately you have to analyze and interpret the data. So for the purpose of analysis and bringing out some in the tabulation form, etc., quantification is very important, because you cannot it is very difficult to analyze the qualitative data.
Okay, ma'am, Arundhati Sharma, one of our participants, is asking, in situation like COVID-19, where teaching is through online methods,
Yes.
how do you think that empirical research can be undertaken? How can we use the techniques in such situation? Empirical situation.
it is visibly difficult because in empirical research, the importance is of course the data collection. You have to collect the data while going to field. So you will have to rely upon the online data only. You cannot go, and at least in this situation uh, right now in lockdown period, you cannot go and take the data. But after some time, you can have that facility. Otherwise, you will have to rely on the online data only, and there are some official sites of the UN and some other social institutes, so you can have that opportunity to visit those sites.
Okay. Ma'am, there is one more question from Maris Ford. He is Assistant Professor, Gujarat National University, asking for the necessity and role of hypothesis in research.
See, hypothesis is very important in research, though it is not that much important in legal research, because legal research is on the premise that there are actual propositions are there, so there is no scope for imagination. So no or little scope for imagination. So in legal research, usually hypothesis is not a must thing. In place of hypothesis, we uh, give the research questions. So problem is very important rather than hypothesis.
Ma'am, there are a few more questions. I think we can take 2 or 3 questions more because everybody wants to explore
Sure.
this research area.
Sure.
So there is a question from Dr. Avive. She is asking, what is the theoretical approach you have used in carrying out the empirical research as a socio-legal researcher? Is it required to use theoretical approach while doing an empirical study?
Yes, in legal studies it is yes, because social legal study without the strong background of doctrinal study is not possible. And for that, you have your theoretical background should be very strong, because though it is empirical study, you have to develop the problem, formulate the problem, you have to develop the research questions, you have to develop the questionnaires, and ultimately you are getting the data. So your theoretical foundation must be very, very strong. The weak foundation will not good for social study.
Ma'am, Dr. Rahul Nikam wants to know, actually he wants the guidance, how to publish in Web of Science journal and technical aspects. How to Web of
Sorry.
Science.
Sorry, I regret I don't have the means at this point of time I cannot answer this question because it is not my purview.
Ma'am, these
You
are
can take any other question.
I guess all the questions you already answered, ma'am. And ma'am, there is one request because at some points of time your voice was breaking. So
Okay.
all the participants, they want to access your PPT
Okay.
for guidance or empirical research. If you
Okay.
want, if you can share with us, ma'am.
Yes, yes. Should I share later on or right now?
After this session, ma'am, you can share with us.
Okay. Yeah, sure, sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us on this particular topic, empirical research. Every professor, every assistant professor want to explore this area, empirical research. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snehal. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Ma'am.
So, Ms. Rishti, now our next speaker is Professor Bajpayee.
So,
my technical moderator, Mr. Suhas, can you please check if he is there?
No, ma'am. I cannot see anyone right now in the meeting room, waiting room.
So by that time, I request any of the participants if they would like to share something, if they would like to speak something, they are welcome. You kindly raise your hand. So our technical moderator and my moderator Srishti, she will be able to see. You can speak on your experiences regarding empirical research if you have used in your teaching or otherwise. Because right now we are on that in that thinking mode, and already our thinking process is on. That how we will be able to use our empirical research in teaching.
And there is one participant, Mr. Rahul Nikam.
Yes. Kindly unmute him so that he can speak.
Yes, ma'am, I've done.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Rao, sir, as I am his student also. And I can see my colleague Srishti also there. Thanks for giving me opportunity. There are two aspects which I think is very important. One is teacher can be very well in teaching, but simultaneously if you ask him to get published the articles in a reputed journals like Web of Science and elsewhere and all others, it is really becomes difficult for him. I have seen that there is a lot of biasness as far as the international publications are concerned towards the Indian writers. What happens here that even if you follow a lot of guidelines and techniques, and as per their portal rules and regulations, when we submit our final article for the peer review, one or other way, I have seen, even I have uh, I was a co-writer with one of the eminent person under the IITs. That professor and myself, we were writing one particular article where a lot of empirical research was taken, and then some formulas were also used, and the note which was given by the peer review of the journal saying that it is not qualifying as per our standard. So the question here is that when we are going through our UGC care list, there we find out so many journals are mentioned from the American and England particular country and the publisher. The biggest problem for us when we says that the Indian teacher is required to publish their articles in this particular international platform journals, it is very difficult for us to either cope up with them, or something is wrong as far as the care list itself. Because I think there was also when our Rao sir was the vice chancellor in the NLU, other day we had a discussion in the common gathering where sir was also little bit critical about the situations where they says that there is a 50% back in our side as Indian writers who do not follow the steps which are required to be followed, and other thing is that we are not being aware of how a particular things need there, because I have compared 2 to 3 particular publications which was published by the foreign author, and then the same material, same thing we try to publish with our Indian author, and there I find out that only the way of writing is different, but the substance and the empirical things which are required to qualify a particular article to be published in Web of Science, as far as the empirical data based on outcome finding reporting in the journal, is little bit all the experience with, and if possible any one of you or even Rao sir can help us in better understanding, and so if possible kindly arrange one session in this FDP to guide how to publish the journals, how to publish the articles in this international reputed journals where they required more on statistics or the quantitative methods. That is from my side. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Rahul sir.
Yes. Any other participant would like to share his or her experience, their issues? Like Mr. Rahul Nikam, he has shared his one problem that even though we are doing research, quantitative research and everything, but then how to get it published in international journals. So this is one issue which he has shared with us. Any other participant would like to share something? You can share about your experience regarding your publication, your research, including your PhD research as well. You can raise your hand. Yes, one. Kindly raise your hand.
Ma'am, there is one Deepak Kumar Chauhan, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. R.K. Venkatraman, thank you. Means giving this opportunity to me. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
So I'm working here in the Central University of Punjab and the Department of Law. And regarding this question of publication in some good journals, or I had this experience with me, and I had experience of this empirical research also. My main work that was on environmental issues, and the project that I completed that was the public distribution system, evaluation of this public distribution system with reference to this our National Food Security Act. So as per by this reference, if suppose we are having this interdisciplinary approach in our empirical research, so very first is that we are focusing on our this doctrines, a strong foundation that we can always get from the doctrinal research. If suppose we are having very good foundations of doctrines, then we can move for this empirical research. If suppose we are moving towards this particular way of empirical research, basic on some of the specific objective, and we are having a very good hypothesis, also means the idea of justification of this work or this objective. So in that case, we can go for the interdisciplinary approach. Like for me, I was having this approach with law to the environmental science and technology. So some of the colleagues helped me. So that's why I'm having good publication with such type of this Scopus listed journals or this VIPS journals. Second, my work was on this law issue, and which I make a combination of this agreement with this social department, social sciences department. So I got that opportunity to get published my work again in Scopus listed journal. Again, one of the publication that can give help to all the participants or students or in the field of research for publication. One of my experience that I would like to share with all my dear colleagues and participants in this session, what we can do, just that was very simple publication, a simple work of publication, and we got that publication in VIPS journal, top ranked journal. In that, what I did, I make a collection of data. I collected data from this library resources. So what is the status of Indian journals and good publishers or our professors in the field of this social science or legal studies, and what is the rank of those publications at international level in this Scopus listed journals? So by this way, what I can just share with you, I'm not guiding to anyone, means all are having more experiences as ma'am shared with us. So, but my submission is here that with interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach, we can get good publications, and even we can make collaboration with the science faculties or technology faculties, like the cybersecurity faculty also. So this is my submission about the publication. And as ma'am told to us that basic foundation here, doctrinal research. Without doctrinal work, we cannot go for the empirical work. So foundation is doctrinal one. Based on those foundation, we can set our objectives, we can set our hypothesis, and we can review the literature. Then we can design our research, and we can go for the empirical research. And one more important point is here, if suppose we are using this technology these days, we are in this pandemic, COVID-19. Here we can take help from the Google resources, internet resources, and we can prepare and share our data to the subject matter, those objectives. So we can get online details also. There is no specific need to move in the society these days for any empirical research. So we can collect data by utilizing these internet resources, also the computer resources. So this is my submission. Thank you, just giving this chance to me to speak with all you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak, for sharing your experience. Thank you.
Yes, let's welcome Professor Bajpai. He is with us now. Yes, Professor Bajpai.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Namaste. Good afternoon. Good
Namaste.
afternoon.
And my regards to Professor Venkatarao. I could see him. And thank you for having me here. And
Professor Bajpai, quickly let me, just tell you that what exactly we have done since morning. So before your lecture, there was one lecture by Professor Snehal Fadnavis. She is very well known in empirical research. She has carried out more than 10 or 12 empirical research. So she shared her experience that whether there are any benefits of empirical research in teaching or not. So her session was on the same, that what is the relation between empirical research and teaching, and are there any advantages for a teacher to carry out empirical research on it. And now we are very fortunate that you are with us. Now I request my moderator, Ms. Srishti, that kindly introduce her and then kindly begin the session.
I welcome Professor Vajpayee sir, all the participants in the second technical session of the day, that is teaching techniques of criminal law. Professor Dr. G.S. Vajpayee, Registrar, National Law University, Delhi, serves as Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice, Chair Professor at K.L. Arora Chair in Criminal Law at National Law University, Delhi, and also as the chairperson at the Center for Criminology and Victimology. Besides having masters in criminology and criminal justice, he holds a doctorate in criminology and victimology and a postdoctorate in criminology from Leicester University, United Kingdom. He is also the Registrar, National Law University, Delhi. Before this, he was serving as Professor, Law and Development and chairperson at the Center for Criminal Justice Administration, National Law Institute, University, Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. He also had positions at the Indian Institute of Public Administration, Bureau of Police Research and Development, Punjab Police Academy, Punjab and Department of Criminology and Forensic Science, University of Sagar, Madhya Pradesh. Professor Vajpayee has authored 18 books and more than 80 papers, more than 3 dozen open editorial in the leading dailies like Indian Express, The Hindu, The Tribune, etc. and 12 project reports and several monographs. As many as 12 students have already completed doctoral dissertations, PhD, under his guidance. He is the editor of 3 prestigious international journals, Journals of Victimology and Victim Justice, published from the SAGE, Journal of National Law University, Delhi, published from SAGE, and Indian Journal of Criminology, a publication of Indian Society of Criminology since 1972. Professor Vajpayee held many prestigious international assignments for aid advanced research in criminal law and criminal justice. He has been to the University of Paris, France, under UGC Indo-French Cultural Exchange Program 1999 to work on victims' position in the French criminal justice system. He was also the recipient of prestigious Commonwealth Academic Staff Fellowship at the Department of Criminology, University of Leicester, the United Kingdom, for an advanced research and teaching for the year 2003 and 4. Dr. Vajpayee also visited International Victimology Institute, Tokyo University, Japan, for delivering invited lectures in July 2007. As a part of the academic collaboration, he has made significant presentations at the Center for Criminology, the University of Oxford, and the Department of Criminology and Law, United Kingdom, on the issues of post-Delhi gang rape, legal reforms, and victim justice. As a significant achievement, Professor Vajpayee worked as co-principal investigator of the MHRD UGC E-PG Pathshala project and led the creation of online e-text and video lectures on 367 modules of 15 papers for PG level courses in law. Professor Vajpayee also contributed significantly to police training research. I welcome Professor Vajpayee to please guide us on teaching techniques on criminal law. Vajpayee sir, over to you, sir.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Srishti, and very generous introduction. And uh, so, thank you first of all to Professor Rashmi and the VIPS and Professor Rao for having me here. Uh, the topic today is the teaching techniques in criminal law. Uh, in 1 hour, I'll try to sort of first talk about some methods that we uniquely use in case of criminal law. And I'll also sort of try to evaluate the efficacy of certain new methods which are currently being used by the law teachers. I'm sure that when it comes to teaching method, these days, more than teaching techniques and teaching methods for teaching a subject, I feel it is equally important how not to teach criminal law, or for that matter, any other subject. Uh, Even when we probably do not employ any particular method consciously, we are definitely trying to use some method or the other. The fact remains that we are not probably aware of that particular method. Largely, the scenario in the country is that law teaching is uh, confined to certain specific ways of teaching, and predominantly case method, problem methods, and Socratic methods. And these days now field action project and clinical method. Some of these methodologies are definitely being used by the law schools, especially after the arrival of 5-year legal education programs in the country. And I'm sure the teachers are trying to innovate and experiment with a variety of ways through which the contents could be effectively delivered. Especially the arrival of ICT application, computer-enabled programs, these things have really changed the scene. My first issue would be, are we method conscious in terms of our teaching? I always feel that we are primarily the subject people. So in the back of our mind, it is always the material, the knowledge, the information, and other things that we know about that subject is a prominent factor. We probably, and I think some resource person must have discussed the psychology of learning. And I'm sure that the cognitive methods of imbibing the content and how the learning takes place, all those principles and things must have been told. These things are important because when we speak, we are probably not aware of the extent to which our content is being registered by the participant or not. That is something very important. And the teacher invariably does not have any technique or any way to know whether the teaching or the content that he is delivering or she is delivering is really being traveled to the audience or not. Actually, this is something, the first question. Now, how many of us as a teacher are conscious of method first in delivering our content? That is the $1,000,000 question. Because we generally go to the classroom and start speaking, and some way or the other, method automatically develops. So that is our idea of method in a law school. And this approach is a very random and tentative, I always say. Why are we now becoming sort of method conscious these days? Because probably we have now a kind of student group who are expecting from the law school that some innovations will be dealt with, some contents in a different form would be delivered, some interactive sessions will take place. A lot of other things are there which drive a teacher to think of method. And thinking of method is the first thing. I think so. First thing, those my fellow colleagues, teachers who are attending this program, they must first find out whether are they really method conscious or not when it comes to teaching. Because no amount of course or a training program can give them this conviction that the method is important. Importance of method is self-evident in the sense that You know the content, you know your subject. The challenge remains how effectively can you deliver them. So with regard to criminal law, especially today, I next couple of minutes, I'll be discussing with examples the way the criminal law can be dealt. But that is not the full stop. There are always commas and semicolon, I always believe. So I am not inclined to put any full stop what I say, but what I believe in all these years, because I also confronted a variety of audiences where the different demands are posed, and probably few things make sense. Like for instance, in my case, I realize my inclination to the method uh, was because of certain interactions and questions that were raised in the classroom while we teach. Those questions drove me to search some ways to look at the method. Like, for instance, I can immediately tell you before I have a presentation, I can take you to that presentation. But I remember when I was teaching a class in the National Law University, Delhi, and I was teaching the topic of arrest in the CRPC. And the question was raised by a very active student. He said, sir, the law of arrest looks very fine after D.K. Basu judgment and after the amendments in the CRPC. You have several sections, 41A, 41B, C, D. Idea is not to unnecessarily arrest people, because the individual interest and individual rights are very important, so that nobody is arrested recklessly. The criminal procedure has a inbuilt protection. That is what you are saying. This is the interpretation and discussion of a black letter law. He asks, sir, to how this law is put into action by the police when they actually confront the situation. I had a number of ways to answer this question, but I thought this question is essentially asking me to bring a context or a realistic appraisal of the application of the law, which the student must learn. I said, let us do it in a way. I immediately organized a meeting with the local police station with a group of students. And I gave the police station certain briefing before taking them to. And the SHO concerned in the police station was then narrating to the student that these are the difficulties and these are the actual questions which arise when the black letter law is put into application. Now, having done that, when we returned to the class, the student had number of ideas because the learning was experiential. Experiential learning is very important. So making them experienced is all about empiricism. You were speaking about empirical researches. Empirical means experiencing something. Law, in fact, the entire body of law teaching has been constructed in a way which becomes black letter law dominated. Black letter law dominated means the textual law. Textual law looks very fine because it is drafted by very able people. So whenever you read the text of the law, it impresses the person. And we invariably get to this experience that this is the best way, that is the best law. The moment law is transferred to a real situation, a number of questions arise. And those questions are cannot be answered unless you understand the context. So my experience of taking the student to the police station in terms of teaching the law became very, very significant for this student. Now, another experience I am sharing in teaching of criminal law, I'll go very systematically. Allow me just 2 minutes with this experience. Another day I remember, I was teaching the witnesses turning hostile or examination of witnesses as a CRPC topic. Again, the students were not sort of understanding that what it happens when when a witness is confronted by the police or confronted in the court, or how he become hostile, and what are the experiences associated with victim turning hostile. I said, again, I need somebody to tell these things in my class. I contacted the local court and I find that is there any witness who who has some kind of experience. I find some pocket witnesses are there. Pocket witnesses is a very concept the law practitioners understand. There are witnesses who are off and on brought to the court to give testimony in variety of situations. I brought that witness who had seen a lot of court trial, and he narrated a host of experiences. And having listened those experiences, the student had a completely different picture of the courtroom situation, when how the witnesses are cross-examined, how the chief happens, how the witnesses turn hostile in a trial, and kind of things. So these are the ways through which. So my entire idea of saying all this to you is that law originally has been written in the text, but it is applied to a lot of practical situation. So I'll take you to a quick range of issues in this presentation, starting from the very idea of criminal law. I'm sure the audience, the participants who are listening to me would connect me on this particular point. I always ask this first question in the students when I go to teach criminal law, that why criminal law? Why are you there in this class? Why people think criminal law is important? Why there is a discussion always on the criminal law? And very innocent observation would come. That's a criminal law. What is criminal law? Criminal law is something which punishes the people. So the general idea of criminal law as a punishment apparatus is something which is ingrained in our thinking and thought process. You have to sort of take the student much away from this conventional idea of criminal law being a punitive apparatus. My journey of criminal law is starting from being a punitive apparatus to become a criminal law which has some positive obligations. Positive obligations in criminal law are very important. That is the recent thinking. I'll come to it. So when you say criminal law, you have to first convince the student that how criminal law, what is the nature of criminal law. I'll share the screen and probably show you some can you allow me to share the screen? Yes.
Please. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are allowed.
Yes, sir. You are the co-host. You can share your screen.
Oh, very good. I hope you can see.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
I will start this criminal law teaching discussion because in criminal law we have mainly substantive law, procedural law, and local and special laws. When it comes to substantive law, you need to first tell the student what is the nature of criminal law. What is the foundational method? Foundational method means how the criminal law came into being. And there is a lot of history to it. So historically, criminal law evolved from society as uncodified canons, and then it became codified. Basically, the moral principles that were being shared by the society, they have been over the years brought a formal mechanism of law. Now, codified law in all the countries across the globe, it has originated from the social codes. And therefore, you'll find a lot of social bearing as far as law is concerned. I am sure that when you start a class of IPC or CRPC, generally we start from section 1, territorial description, definitions, section 1, 2, 3. No, I think we need to devote a couple of classes on these pointers which I'm showing. I don't have time to speak on. So you please read the history, the Ashworth, Andrew Ashworth History of Criminal Law as one of the most pioneering book where he is saying criminal law is a historical continuity. He said it is passed by the parliament, that is all right, but historical, moorings of the criminal law cannot be obscured. And third, he said, like in Indian context, I always say if I'm teaching a class of IPC, it is very important for the student to have one lecture on the making of IPC. I would recommend, I cannot really speak all the things, but a couple of points I'll make. A fantastic book by Richard Berry and Stanley Liu. Stanley Liu in Hong Kong. They have brought this codification of IPC. Singapore, they have done this book. And this book traces the experiences of Macaulay, why he penalized homosexuality in India, why he has made it uh, decriminalized in the UK, because the Macaulay was the author of law in India as well as in the UK. He has proposed a different set of law to the UK, but he has proposed a different set of law in India. So he was well aware of the nature of Indian society. That was the first thing that we need to understand. So I think some discussion on the making of IPC is required to be made. And also, when you are discussing the substantive law, you have to introduce that this paper of substantive law, that is IPC, has 4 very important components which are delivered. Of course, you are teaching, so you must be knowing that generally we have a very important focus on the principles of substantive criminal law, where we teach the student that why one person, one innocent should not be punished, let 99 guilty may go unpunished. Why? What is the principles of burden of proof? What are the consideration in mens rea? What are the types of mens rea? What is the theory of causation? What are the other principles informing the criminal law? And I'm telling you with a lot of confidence to you that if you have grounded your student well in the arena of principles of criminal law, I'm sure that they would be very, very, remarkable in the later course of their learning. Second component, which is very crucial, is the general defense. How the general defense is taught. We all know that we have a very brilliant book or lectures on general criminal law by Chandrasekhar Pillai. And this book takes a very detailed view of why the general defenses, general exceptions in criminal law are important, and case law. But I have recently seen that a lot of things are changing. Like, for instance, I don't have time, otherwise it will become a criminal law lecture. But discussion is going on the extent to which the mens rea has to be emphasized, because there is a lot of thinking going on that even the actus reus in some cases is enough to hold guilty someone. So the requirement of mens rea is being reinterpreted in several cases, like those are very strict liability cases. Then third component remains the legal provisions. How the legal provisions, because all said and done, I am of the view that the students must be very well and clearly aware of the law, the legal provisions with respect to different. Indian Penal Code is a very exhaustive code which talks about as I just mentioned, that the drafting of Indian Penal Code is very important. I think you can find some time with your student to teach them how every punctuation of the text of IPC become very important, and what is the role of all this terminology: unknowingly, deliberately, intentionally, wantonly. All these terms, I think a lot of discussion is possible. So when legal provisions are taught in the classroom, I personally feel that each expression can be taken. And if you see the commentary, the good commentaries in criminal law, they have devoted over the years a lot of attention on each and every expression. It is a different matter that some of these expressions are now confronting and rather even contradicting some new thinking in this field, because new knowledge is being generated. But that is the beauty. So if you really want to emphasize, because the entire IPC, there is no clear description of mens rea. How the mens rea is to be, understood, that is very important. So the best thing would be that this terminology in the legal provisions must be taken very seriously. Now, fourth component of substantive criminal law teaching remains the cases, precedents, and judicial opinions. I think I have a detailed discussion in the forthcoming slides when I'll discuss the case method. I think some experiment you as a teacher can do in terms of the case law teaching, because case law is, without case law, criminal law is nothing. So how you are handling the case law is very important. And sometimes the teachers over the years, those who have been teaching for 10, 15 years, the cases are so clear in their memory, they can reel out those cases written. But I would say, please don't do that. Try to get the student participated in case law discussion. I'll come to case law discussion later. I move on to criminal procedure. This is my favorite area. I have been teaching. I realize one thing very uh, clearly in all my years in teaching this subject. First thing is no teacher. Probably, please forgive me if I'm exaggerating. I have never seen any teacher raising the discussion, what is procedure, what of law, and why of the law. These two things are very important bedrock of the law teaching method. Like for instance, what is criminal procedure and why it is called procedure. So I realized that there are theories and principles of criminal procedure. So if you read the Tibet, Thibbet, Tibet's work, he has explained the theory of procedure, and also Sullivan and others, they have clearly identified the theory of criminal procedure. Those who are listening me can note down, theory of criminal procedure has not been yet documented formally in the realm of criminal law teaching in India. No law school is teaching the theory of criminal procedure. No, without teaching them the theory of criminal procedure, if you are jumping straightway to the classification of court, the powers of the court, bail, arrest, investigation, then probably we theoretically know the difference between substantive law and procedural law, but procedure is very sacrosanct. And the genesis of procedure lies in the appreciation of constitution, constitutional principle, and the worth to human dignity and human rights. Procedure is all about justness. So if you see, I think you can ask these students, if you have a collective view of criminal procedure, not a fragmented view, you will realize criminal procedure is an interlocking law. So on the one hand, it gives power to the police. On the other hand, it puts a lot of restrictions to that power to be rationalized. George Floyd is dominating the scene throughout the world. It is the overstepping or the abuse of power granted to the police. Powers to police are rationalized by the law. Definitely the police has power. Police is the only agency that has been given to use physical power. They can arrest, they can physically touch, but that power has been subjected to a lot of restrictions. So what is the theory informing it? Theory is the balance. The one term that describes the criminal procedure is the balance. Now you can deliver a lecture on balance. Balance of what? Balance of individual liberty and state power. So criminal law, if you are listening carefully, I am making a very important statement. In conventional teaching, criminal law is considered to be a liability creating law. I'm talking about the method to teach criminal law. Criminal law, we have to sort of dispel these myths of criminal law. So one is that the popular and most widely held view is criminal law is a liability creating law. That is a fact, because every provision of criminal law creates liability. So if you violate the law, liability is fixed. But please try to understand, when criminal law creates liability, it also confers certain power, certain entitlements to the stakeholder. So accused is given lot of power, entitlements and rights. What are the pre-trial entitlements of the accused in the criminal procedure? What are the What are the rights of a taught? We have to shift this emphasis from liability to the right. So my criminal law is a right conferring criminal law. My criminal law is not alone a liability creating criminal law. Your teaching will undergo a significant change the moment you start looking at criminal law from the perspective of the rights of the participants which are provided in the law. And this law itself provides a lot of protection to the complainant, to the witness, to the children, to the women, and to all. But a selective view is taken, like when Floyd's selective view was taken, when custodial torture is taken, police thinks that they can sort of put pressure to the detainee. But the same criminal law, section 330, 331 of IPC, clearly make the police liable for any violation made during the custodial interrogation. So we need to understand, similarly, use of power by the police. All these things are very well rationalized. So when we talk about the rule of law is given effect not only by the Constitution, but also by the procedural law. So when we try to rationalize the power of the law enforcement agency, we are essentially rationalizing the power of the state, because police is the arm of the state. So I say a lot of criminal procedure can be taught theoretically. When I say theoretically, I am talking about a criminal procedure which is out there to talk about the balance of the individual liberty and the state power. I'm sure that the developments taken in the year 2019, especially in terms of several Supreme Court landmark judgments, whether they are homosexuality, Joseph Sain, Puttuswamy, all these judgments are definitely very remarkable. But let us see the implication of these judgments to the criminal law. One thing that happened, and probably this should be told to the student in the very first class, that this is the time when the primacy of the individual is being reorchestrated. What is the primacy of the individual? Because these laws are the state law. Criminal law is a public law. And criminal law has been enforcing as a state law by the state governments to regulate the behavior of the individual. But with these judgments, the individual is being brought back to the focus. What is the difference when individual is focused in the criminal law and when the state is focused? See, when a trial is organized, when in a trial, a poor accused, I say poor in the sense, not economically poor, he's powerless person. A powerless person is confronting the might of the state. What does it mean? So on the one hand, there is a person who has been charged and he is there to face the trial and investigation. On the other hand, you have a powerful police, powerful prosecution, powerful judiciary. Now the person would necessarily surrender if he is not given certain entitlement and rights before these powerful institutions. So a criminal law teaching can be organized in a manner. So apart from displaying the importance of the state, you can also highlight the importance of. Now we have a choice. The third point on my screen is due process and crime control and preventive. Please tell your student that criminal law originated to be a due process apparatus, because we wanted a fair trial. Due process came from the US jurisdiction, but rule of law is popular in common law jurisdiction. So due process means we are there to be governed by the rule of law. Means the law will take its course. The agencies would not overstep in terms of misusing their power. This is the ideal state. But criminal law is not ideally enforced. I'm telling you. Andrew Ashworth, you must have, Andrew Ashworth says that a just criminal law as an impossibility. He said criminal law related violations are so frequent, so commonplace that it is difficult to restrain criminal law. You see, Western scholarship is largely in the arena of restraining criminal law. That's why Douglas Hussack says criminal law ought to be a criminal law ought to be a last resort. It should not be a first resort. Criminal law should be applied when nothing works, because criminal law has a potential to take away the individual liberty and dignity, and it has a lot of implication. So due process means criminal law is enforced to emphasize due process, but crime control centric criminal law is to somehow control crime irrespective of what is happening to individual rights and liberty. These are the choices before the state. We in India has this impression. We have this impression now that the focus of criminal law in this country is gradually drifting to crime control model. Dear listeners, I'll tell you one more thing. When CRPC was amended in the year 1973, the idea was to emphasize the due process. And therefore, you see the preamble of the amended CRPC, speedy justice, justice to poor, all rights of the accused. These things are there in the preamble. So we wanted a due process centric law. Now in 2020, we are witnessing a law which is in hurry to regulate the people. So if in lockdown, people do not submit, they should be taken to the lockups. If you are violating any matrimonial requirement, you should be behind the bar. If you are violating any environmental requirement, there is a punishment. This is a different story of criminal law. So you need to tell the student, otherwise these ideas which I am telling will not emerge from the bare reading of IPC, CRPC or evidence. But these are the emerging trends. And preventive criminal law, we have forgotten what is preventive criminal law. I can back that not many people in this country are talking about preventive criminal law. What is preventive criminal law? You read the language of criminal law. Every provision of criminal law was envisaged to be preventive, telling you in advance that if you indulge in, this is the punishment. But we are not applying that law as a preventive mechanism, as if we are waiting the people to violate the law and then we'll take care of you. We have forgotten the preventive emphasis of criminal law. So a classroom discussion on the criminal law, applying this method, which is very generic, can be very, very fertile, and criminal law become very, very interesting for the student. I can come back to this discussion if there is any question, but let me go to the case law. Though it looks very conventional, me talking about case law teaching, because in any case, all the teachers are definitely using case law. But I said in the beginning, it is not you who should be telling you the case law. It is for your student, they should understand the case law and discuss. And the best way that you can give a template to your student to tell them in advance that in every case, these can be the components. Now you make a reading of case law through these components which are on my screen. Because reading a case law in a totality, the student may not be able to discern the finer components of a case. So making them read the statutory interpretation, facts, pleadings, evidence appreciation, application, inference, case relied, comparative, I mean, how this case law compare with the previous cases decided, ratio, sentencing, punishment. So I think you can involve 10, 20 students. You can give them every single parameter and let them work and let them present. This is the method of case law teaching basically. If teacher is only telling the student what happened, what were the facts in this case, then this happened, generally teacher enjoyed, dictating and discussing the case, and the student listen. I would say you give this case to the student, ask them to divide this case into these parameters. There can be many more parameters, and let them understand the different components of a case. You will realize that the understanding of a case become far more productive on the part of a student, and they start sort of raising the issues. Like for instance, if I ask why certain cases were relied, why all other cases were not relied. A very simple example I can give you. I know just a couple of minutes. If you read the death penalty jurisprudence, and if you see a judge, suppose the ratio of the case is life imprisonment converted into death penalty. Suppose this, let us first look at the ratio, not fact. So ratio was, the life imprisonment was, so there are generally two outcomes. Either life imprisonment are held, a life imprisonment is held, or life imprisonment is converted into death penalty. This is generally the structure. Now, you see the citation of cases. So if case to result into death penalty, the citation would be very different. If case has to convert into life imprisonment only, the case citation would be very different, because you cannot go away. So you are citing the case, mitigating and aggravating factors, and you are saying aggravating, then you cannot, you cannot convert. You have to essentially convict in death penalty. So citation actually gives you an idea right in the beginning, what is the direction of the case. So this is very important. I think some time can be devoted to this exercise. And the best way to create the template, you supply these templates to your students in advance, that case law reading ought to be in these and these way. Case method, I always say that there can be a lot of components in case method. You can sort of look at the interpretative problem, text, legislative debates, because there are lots of legislative debates, committee reports. So sometimes the law commission reports or other reports you can bring into question. Broader political history. You will see that always with the change in political party, the emphasis changes. Some are more likely to convict, some are less likely to. Policy, dictionaries, analogous statutory language. So a lot of things you can give to your students in a variety of ways. And also, the problem method is another method which we use very effectively. A case, decided case, any case you pick up and frame a problem. So like if any popular case, suppose I am discussing Best Bakery case to demonstrate how the selected witnesses are called, how the subversion of the rule of law takes place. I think all the parameters you can find in one case, and you can illustrate that what legal rule guides and what are the important discussions which can be raised. What are the how the interpretation is skills. Like for instance, as I have mentioned, Best Bakery case and criminal. If a teacher has to show that how everything comes to a failure, police fails, prosecution fails, judiciary fails, everybody fails. That is the best case. So you create a problem. Suppose you are discussing the failure of criminal justice in our context. That case sums up everything. Nandini Sundar, you read, Salma Judum case, very famous case, which is, in next slide background, the small children, school-going children were given weapons. So I think when you formulate a problem, so basically criminal law can be very applied if a problem is formulated, witnesses turning hostile, victims issues, acid victims and all that. Then you bring the case and you can discuss it problem method. Role playing, we have this methodology where the students can be given the role of preparing the pleadings. Like I can give you a very simple example. So suppose a case results into acquittal. You can give your student an exercise that what would have been your pleadings if you wanted this case to be resulted into conviction. So when case results into acquittal, you'll have to look at the pleadings of both the parties, how they will, what you would have done as a lawyer for the defense to see that the case resulted into acquittal. What would have been? I think so. These role play become very, very important. And when role play is given, I don't know how many times in class, CRE is generally, classroom exercise is generally done in many places where witness depositions are shown. But these days we have a lot of multimedia support. And I'm sure the students are much more informed about various video clippings. A lot of websites are providing some clippings about the witnesses depositions, investigations, court trial situation, and also the different kind of legal aid clinic things. So I think the even I have seen even the TED Talks or TED Talks, many people are listening these days very, they have very popular repository of various documentaries relating to the situation. So it's a good idea to show the documentary. I'm using a method which is very popular in the Western world, in India also, I guess, that is called flip class. Flip class means classroom situation is made just opposite. The roles are changed. So instead of the normally the class begins, the teacher comes and start telling you the law and then comes to the case law by the time your time is over. So you cannot go to really anything very at a very advanced level. It's a good idea to supply certain things in advance, like a video, like a case, like material, and give a specific role to be played by the student to make their case or make their presentation, and let the instructor or the teacher interact the student on those issues. So class has flipped. The role that you have been doing is being done by the student in terms of presenting only those things which are descriptive. Now more discussion and analysis is taking place through this interaction. Flip class is a very popular method. Generally, the training institutes are doing a lot through this. Now, another thing is the document. I realized that the reading on the part of teacher as well as student is declining. Nobody wants to go back to the classic books. Like in criminal law, I always insist the student that you go and see at least and feel those books which are classics in your field. Criminal law is very rich in terms of books. Now in India, the libraries are very rich. So probably unless, and because everything is very internet based and you are reading cases on internet and media platform and all that, give them small documents. It may be the reports, one para or one chapter of a report, one case law part, and so many things. And ask the students to not to summarize the document. The students need to give a document critique. It is called a response paper. Response paper is another method which I would strongly recommend you to use it. And you will realize, so you take a, like I can share very simply, again, since we are discussing criminal law. I was always fascinated about the Devlin and Hart debate on the morality of criminal law. Now, these days, even the LLM students do not know what is the Devlin and Hart debate. I introduced this debate right in the beginning. So the question is whether criminal law should regulate the morality or As Hart said, no, criminal law should restrict itself to the harm principle and the wrongfulness of the act. So you give just 4 or 5 pages of this debate to the student to give their reactions. Because when this Wolfenden committee report came, and the state in the in UK, they have decided to uh, decriminalize homosexuality. There was a reaction by Devlin, Lord Devlin. He said, no, this is not done. This is not a good thing, because the role of criminal law is also to preserve the social morality. So social morality and its preservation is also in the purview of law. That was reacted very fiercely by Hart. Hart says, Hart says that the legal moralism is not within the purview of criminal law, as the job of criminal law is to look at the harm principle, because Hart was influenced by the uh, Miller. And I also introduced later the Joel Feinberg, who has written 2 volumes of books, which is very important. In a methodology class, I would refer that you please look at the moral limits of criminal law in 2 volumes, because this question remains even after passing your graduation and post-graduation, the extent to which the criminal law ought to regulate the moral behavior of the people. So John Feinberg has balanced this entire thing, and he says that harm principle is very important, but harm alone is not sufficient for anybody to find guilty. It is very important to look at the wrongfulness of the process. So this is one example I am giving, how a document can be given to students and they can be excited to read these things, because these days the sexual autonomy is in debate. So how this sexual autonomy is finding place after the decriminalization of adultery and homosexuality, a complete different view of criminal law is emerging, and people are somehow uncomfortable also. But Nas Foundation and then later on all these cases have brought a different dimension. But these debates are very, seminal debates in the arena of criminal law, and they are very important. So please look at, and the student groups, team activities, and tutoring can be a very important way to examine. And when I say the response paper, I'm discussing response paper. Give students some time that they need not to prepare the summary of the document that you give them. Rather, they have to give their own genuine reaction to these issues. Experiential learning, I have always says that this is a best way. So clinical exercise, I'm sure a lot of criminal law is possible to learn if the students are placed in some clinic who is dealing with, say, juvenile. Now, juvenile issue is a very important. So if the student wants to understand the juvenile justice issue, let there be a clinic which can go to the places and to see the process of law, the process of these detention home and all that. What are the issues in these places? And this can be a very good idea. And externship in some of these places is very important. I have seen the student who have never been to police station, despite having done their graduation. Please send them to police station. Ask them to sit in the police station for a day to understand that what is happening in the police, how the reports are registered. I would request the fellow teachers to please bring the pro forma of FIR, witness statement, the police diary, all these things to be shown to the student to experience these documents, how the crime register is maintained in the police station. Let them see these documents, what is the warrant form, what is the summon form, all these things to be kept in your clinic, criminal law clinic, and keep these things ready. Sometimes these things are discarded by the police. So take their old copies and show them how the police writes the FIR and how they are registered, how the inventory is made in case of property theft, and all these things, how the search memo is and seizure memo is prepared. This can be tremendously important. how the statements are recorded. How many students in your class must have seen and studied the recorded statement by the police? How they record. This is very important. So I think some discarded material which is thrown by the police, we can have some of these originals from the court record room also, and from police station record room also, and seeing them is very important. Now, last leg of my presentation is when we are discussing the facts in criminal law, so and how the law applies to the facts, that is something very important. This method is something which cuts across the entire discussion of criminal law teaching. So we have to first tell the student that we need to understand the facts of the case. And facts of the case, when they are legally interpreted, their legal importance would emerge. So how the facts are actually detailed in a case, because unnecessary things are always removed. Only the facts which have some legal consequences, those facts are documented. Generally, facts are very sketchingly, looked at by they read it like a story. No, when facts are described in a case, they become very important. Like for instance, when police write the FIR, they try to make it as factual as possible. And then the legal doctrine. So scope of the categories of rule of, so which law applies to these facts. Unless the law becomes applicable or a particular legal doctrine becomes applicable in case of these facts, then nothing works. And also to look at the source of law. So if you are discussing the facts, it means we are also alluding a particular law which will be applied in this situation. And also, when you look at the judicial opinion, means the cases, we need to look at how an opinion is structured and identify its parts. So I always suggested look at in part. Like for instance, please ask your students to at least study, these are very lengthy judgments, whether it is Puttu Swami judgment, Joseph Sain judgment. These judgments they should read. If they want to Selby case, for instance, if evidence law is being discussed, these laws and these case laws have to be studied, and you will see how the judiciary or the judge has formed his or her opinion in these cases. And also the how these statutes or laws are applied. In some cases, you'll find multiple statutes are applied. So sometimes apart from IPC sections, some local and special laws also become, like IT laws, like other laws become applicable. So, and also see how a particular opinion departs from the previous one. So suppose uh, a different view is taken by the court, what is the reasoning? I always feel, and you will realize, we never ask the student, nor the student asks the teacher, why of the law? If they ask why the judge has come to this reasoning. So 2, 3 why will take you to the root cause analysis of the entire thing. And that is the whole objective of discussing. And then you can synthesize all the multiple sources. I'm just skipping this part and coming to the last leg, which is very important, and then I'll open it for discussion. Bringing context to the teaching of law is very important. Without context, probably the law teaching remains very, very isolated. And if you see, what is the idea of bringing? So like take the case study of Floyd, for instance. In India, we have a lot of, or you can look at Dudley Stephens. A lot of cases are there. So when you give them, first you narrate them. I would strongly recommend all of you to ask your student to see, before they come to the class, to see the lectures of Michael Sandel. Michael Sandel is a very known professor of criminal law in Harvard, and his lecturing is phenomenal. A lot of non-law people would sit in the class and watch him speaking, and he raised some very fundamental questions of law in his description of the people's behavior in different situations. So bringing context, otherwise if you are doing a bare act teaching, I'm telling you, bare act teaching versus contextual teaching of law. Contextual teaching of criminal law is my method. This is the takeaway from this class. So make your law teaching very, very contextual. Please bring the popular cases which are dominating the scene, like for instance, triple talaq. I'm telling you another thing while I say so. No classroom in the country in criminal law probably discuss the theory of criminalization. How a behavior is decided to be criminalized by the state. We consider law as a sacrosanct holy cow. We'll never question the text of the law. We will admit that text of the law as a very holy thing, and we will not question why, how come this particular conduct has been criminalized by the state. Have you seen something in the recent past being criminalized and it created a lot of issue? In the beginning of my lecture, I said one trend which you will look at seriously growing in this country, a lot of things which are of regulatory nature. Because there are two types of criminal law engagement. One is substantial, murder ho gaya, rape ho gaya, fine. Others are regulatory, where just people need to be regulated. Regulatory criminal law is also becoming very, very substantive these days. So we want a person who is doing triple talaq to be sent behind the bar. It is a civil law. We want everything which is in civil jurisdiction, environment, traffic, contractual, even I have seen in epidemic. I'm sure you read all the time notification by MHA about the lockdown. In the downside of the page, it is written that how much punishment they are going to levy in under Epidemic Act or under disaster. See, Disaster Management Act is talking about imprisonment. So a lot of civil laws have a criminal component. What does it suggest? It is called over criminalization. We have 3.5 billion cases before the court, and the prisons do not have spaces to confine the people. 65% are under trial. There is something wrong with criminal law. 65% cases do not require imprisonment. They require alternative methods of disposal. So bring these ideas to challenge the imagination of the student is the objective, and that is the method. And therefore, second is application of critical method. 2 minutes. Critical method is this I am doing. I have introduced probably the first time in the country a course called critical criminal law. This coinage we have developed in the National Law University, Delhi. Critical criminal law is about questioning the law and process. So if a court is questioning, we are bringing those laws, we are bringing those case laws, which are questioning the very content of the law, very process of the law. You must have read in the newspaper now, POTA has been amended to give a leverage to the police that they can declare anybody to be a potential terrorist and put him behind the bar. Who has given you this power? What is the source of power and legitimacy of the law? So these things are in the domain of critical criminal law. So please don't teach criminal law alone. Please teach them critical criminal law. I'm developing this paper. I can share the syllabus of this paper if anybody is interested in this direction. And last thing, which was said in the beginning, empirical application. Please try to look at the research work that has been done on the ground with respect to so many aspects of criminal law. Try to quote that experience in your classroom by making use of number and percentage and all that. I can bet that the student would be thrilled to know these findings, and especially the work done by Daksh Vidhi Center. They are bringing lots of reports, and they are telling something which is quite contrary to the popularly held belief with regard to criminal law. So my idea of method is to challenge the conventional ideals and ideas in criminal law and try to bring something innovation in your law teaching. Otherwise, it's a very thrilling subject, and this has become so popular in my place in National Law University, Delhi. You will not realize that more than any other branch of law, criminal law is the most popular in the LLM, even in the undergraduate. So with this, I would close here, and the organizers would tell further about if any interaction is possible on this.
so much. Please spare just 4-5 minutes for a few questions which we can take up from the participants. So, Vajpayee sir, there are a few questions.
Okay.
There is a question from Poonam Sharma. She is asking, the question is on actually criminology. She is asking, how can we make teaching of criminology, especially schools of criminology, more interesting for undergraduate students? Schools of
Yes,
criminology.
I could not discuss criminology in much detail. I thought many more would be the criminal law background. See, criminology schools, I would say that the schools are divided into three very broad categorization. You do not devote much time on the traditional schools of thought, like classical and all that. You give a passing reference. You come to sociological school, psychology, and radical and critical, and lot of ideas can be generated, and lot of contextual analysis is possible by devoting attention to these 2-3 schools which I have read. And there are fantastic discussion in basic text of criminology you'll find in any course. So I'm like, particularly I'm very thrilled about critical criminology and radical criminology. Again, uh, uh, in any classroom, when you say that there are crimes of dominance and there are crimes by weak, so crime of dominance by those who are in the power, so generally you can interpret these things in a very critical. Stephen Box's work you can refer, very powerful work. So this is it.
Thank you, sir. So, Dr. Tushita Sharma, she is criminal law. She's asking, in context to the great delays ensuing in trial, which was an integral aspect of the preamble to the procedural law, do you suppose time is ripe for unveiling a new criminal procedure law?
Actually, today the discussion was more on method rather than content of criminal law. So I deliberately didn't touch criminal law as such. This question is purely in the domain of criminal procedure. And uh, I would say the criminal procedure was amended in the year 1973. They have brought a lot of changes already to make the law speedier, to avoid delay and all that. But somehow the agencies of criminal law, police, prosecution, courts, they are not able to match with the challenges. Yes, there is a scope of change, as I said, and you must be knowing that a committee has been constituted to reform criminal law. I am there on that committee. We are definitely looking at the, because I am of the view that the number of cases which are currently going into the funnel of criminal justice system, they should not go. If the number is cut to, say, 30%, probably the efficiency of the court would raise in terms of time and efficiency. That would probably solve the problem. But that amendment or that change in the criminal procedure is definitely required.
Sir, can we take a few more questions?
Yes, sure.
Priyanka Sharda, she is asking for your comment on restorative justice usefulness in Indian society.
Again, this is beyond my purview, but I can answer this. For this lecture, I didn't touch these things. Restorative justice in India is because we have failed, I would say, in 2 counts. We could not implement the similar things that we have already in CRPC, like compounding and plea bargaining. Compounding and plea bargaining have some reflection of restorative justice, but plea bargaining in this country has failed because the plea bargaining require a different type of mindset on the part of court, lawyers, and the system. Restorative justice is a tall order expectation at the moment in a criminal justice system which is already crumbling. But I would say in case of juvenile justice, the application of restorative justice is possible. We have done a study where we found that in case of, say, POTA, or in case of domestic violence, in case of juvenile justice, yes, the restorative justice is a possibility, and probably some change you would see in the course of time.
So there is one important question by Dr. Parul, and she's asking how to manage time in criminal law class because the discussion goes on and on.
Yes. You should devote more time. You take extra class. See, I think I know that always the criminal law involves a lot of discussion, but you can guide your discussion in terms of always having a framework. Like if we are discussing case law, we have a framework. But I think discussion you have, like for instance, even I face this issue. So what I do, that if in my regular classes I am unable to devote time, I have 230 tutorials. So I bring the student in tutorial. So I would say you organize the tutorial. It is good that you are having discussion and you are falling short of time. It shows that you are a successful person.
And so there are a number of questions on criminology, victimology, witness protection. So because it's such a vast area, criminal law, so I think we can just drop a mail to you if you can answer a few of the questions.
Yes, yes, sure. I'll try. I know I could not touch victimology and other things because the scope was very vast. Those are the areas which I am very interested, of course. So some other day we can have a session on victimology that would probably solve the problem. Yes.
So thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us on such an important thing, how to teach criminal law, such a vast area. Thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time.
My thanks to the participants for very patient hearing, and I'm sorry I could not answer your all question, but you can always connect to me. I am available and I'll try to answer as much as I can. And thank you to Professor Rashmi. Thank you to VIPS and Professor Venkatrao for giving me this opportunity today.
Thank you so much, sir, for spending your valuable time for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And now we can break for lunch. All the participants, now we are breaking for lunch for I guess 20 minutes enough. At 2 p.m. we will start with the third technical session of the day.
So quickly we have taken lunch break for 20 minutes and we are very fortunate that Dr. Vishnu is with us. Welcome, Dr. Vishnu.
Yeah, hello, Professor Rashmi. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, yes, so we'll take just 5 minutes. My moderator of the day, Ms. Srishti Banerjee, our faculty member, she will introduce you to the participants, and she will quickly revise also that what exactly we have done in earlier 2 sessions. Yes,
Okay, fine.
Srishti?
Yes.
Fine.
And after that, we'll request sir to kindly begin with this session. Okay. Yes.
Perfect. Yep.
We are the fifth day of this 7-day FDP program, and then today we had 2 sessions before joining. Before your joining, first technical session was on teaching technique that I'm so sorry. That is interdependency of empirical research and teaching. That was the first session today. By Dr. Snehal Pendavis, and then we had the second technical session on teaching technique of criminal law by Professor G.S. Bajpayee from National University, New Delhi.
Okay.
And we are in the third technical session with you, sir, on environmental law.
Okay.
Ms. Srishti, kindly introduce the guest. Kindly introduce the guest.
So I just start with the saying of you cannot get through a single day without having an impact. But you make what kind of a difference you want to make. Today, 5th of June is incomplete without talking about environment and our duties towards environment. Law is a key to bring order in society. Thus, environmental law emerged as a collection of laws, regulations, agreements, common law that govern how humans interact with their environment. It increases the understanding on key issues related to national as well as international environmental law and policies. In the last technical session of the day, that is teaching techniques to teach environmental law, I would like to invite Dr. Guru sir. Sir is Associate Professor, Head of Department, and in Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, Delhi School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi. Earlier, he had served as a researcher at the Max Planck Institute of European Legal History, Frankfurt, as an assistant professor at the Indian Law Institute, New Delhi, and as a lecturer at National University of Juridical Science, Kolkata, West Bengal. His area of research and teaching are international environmental law, dispute resolution laws, and contract laws. I invite Sir technique on the environmental law. Over to
Thank
you,
you so
sir.
much,
Vishnu, sir.
Professor Srishti. And I can see the senior professors here. Professor Venkatrao sir and Professor Ravindran and some of Professor Rashmi Salpekar and some of my students. I can see them here. I can see Nipun here, and I understand Tushida is also here. And I have Priya as who is currently doing her doctorate research under me, with me. She is also working in VIPS Law School. So thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me to speak to the faculty development program organized by your prestigious institute. And I treat it as a privilege, and it's a fantastic opportunity. And in fact, the organizers have asked me, both Srishti and Professor Rashmi have asked me to speak on two aspects. The first one is today is World Environment Day. It is June 5. And since 1974, the world community under the banner of the United Nations have been celebrating June 5 as the World Environment Day, and every year under different themes. In the past, we have been celebrating it on different aspects like wildlife crimes and global warming, the dangers of human overpopulation, the dangers of marine pollution. So in the past, we have been celebrating it with the different themes, and this year we have the theme with the banner "Time for Nature," and the focus is the protection of biodiversity. And this has been a huge success, like one of the main tools under the United Nations machinery to create awareness and to propagate about the values of environmental protection, about the international environmental policies and laws on various aspects of environmental protection. And this year, as I already discussed, we have the theme "Time for Nature" with a focus on biodiversity. And I'll just briefly, because I'm asked to do that, I'll briefly discuss about this theme on this day. And as you know, biodiversity, it describes variety of life, both on land as well as life underwater. Maybe scientific evidence also proves that we have more than 8 million species of the life on this planet, from plants to animals to fungi to bacteria. And we also have the ecosystems that house the variety of species of life on this planet Earth. Is that all? Life and the ecosystems, is that all that can be called as the biodiversity? No, it is something more than that. When we speak about the biodiversity, we also need to speak about the abiotic, the atmosphere, abiotic substances that supports the biotic forms of life. In fact, it is an intricate web in which each part, both biotic and abiotic elements, are interdependent. We cannot detach any of these elements away from this web, away from this chain, the ecosystem, chain of ecosystem. Removal of any of this element, a misplacement of any of this element from this ecosystem will have its consequence. And unfortunately, this has been happening in the past. Since maybe Industrial Revolution, this has been happening, and for the last 70 years, this intervention, this human intervention and the resultant, breakage in the ecosystem, in the disturbance in the biodiversity, has been immense, and this has resulted in multiple consequences. And the main, as all of us know, is the global warming and the climate change. And all of us know that climate change is real, it's happening, and the consequences are going to be severe in the future. It can have its own environmental consequences, it can have its own economic consequences, it can have its own social consequences, and it is certain to happen, and unless we immediately react to this danger. And on medias, especially on social medias, we very often see posts on the environmental gains of the COVID-19 pandemic, citing a photograph from NASA or ISRO, or maybe indicating that pollution level has gone down, or the noise pollution has gone down. Maybe the waste management has become more effective. Even today in Hindu, I've seen a report which indicates that the pollution level in Mumbai has been is the lowest in the last 20 years. So very many people speak about the environmental gains of COVID-19 pandemic. I would just call it as it's something that is not appropriate. See, when we speak about environmental gains, we are not, it's based on scientific evidence, scientific information, scientific proof, not just, for a shorter duration of time. We need to have scientific evidence which proves that there has been environmental gains over a period of time, so that it can be proved that, of course, any change in the biodiversity, or any change in the in Earth's atmosphere has resulted in a long-term gain. So as long as environmental gains are concerned, I would call them as gains only if they are long-term. No short-term gains can be considered as an environmental gain. And okay, let us agree that there has been environmental gain. And the next question comes: how to retain them in the in the future, in the immediate future as well as in the long term? How to retain them? And if at all, if there is no environmental gain, how to react to the loss of biodiversity, to the imminent environmental dangers? How we should react? I would like to discuss again. The two tasks that are assigned to me are, mixed, and I'm going to speak on both these issues simultaneously. Speaking of environmental day, as well as on the techniques of teaching environmental law. So we know that we live since 2015. The Committee of Nations have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not anything new. Of course, we had the concept of sustainable development inherent in various religious teachings, and it was also inherent, the concept, I'm not speaking about the term, the concept was inherent in many international legal instruments even before, 1987, before it was first, before the term was first used by the Breadland Commission in the year 1987. For example, if I can quote the teachings of Gautam Buddha, he said that these resources are, in fact, that we have borrowed from our future generations. So, in fact, we are indebted to our future generations for letting us use these natural resources, and it is our duty to return these resources intact to the rightful owners of these resources. We cannot dilute the quality or the quantity of these resources. So this is the crux of sustainable development, as at least if you borrow the logic of the Breadland Commission definition. And of course, thereafter, during those days, even during the Stockholm Declaration, 1972, the concept or the term sustainable development was not used. Maybe it was first time used in by the Breadland Commission, and maybe, I don't know, it's not the official definition of sustainable development. Maybe it is considered to be an important definition, primarily maybe because of its poetic beauty. At least that's my observation. And please note that there were more than 100 definitions of sustainable development immediately, which came after in the next 2 decades after 1987. So the main formulation of the idea of sustainable development happened during the decade starting from 1992 to 2002, between the Rio Declaration, between the Rio Summit in 1992, which is commonly called as the Earth Summit, and the Johannesburg Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002. Why I emphasize on this decade as the major era in the formulation of the idea of sustainable development? It is because for the first time, it was officially recognized at different stages. It was officially recognized that there are 3 pillars to the concept of sustainable development: the environmental pollution, environmental protection, the economic development, and the concepts of, the concepts of social justice, social equity. So when we speak about sustainable development, it includes all these 3 pillars, all these 3 integral aspects of together. That makes it sustainable development. It is not one at the cost of the other. Of course, there are arguments, there are philosophical arguments which supports environmental protection. Maybe we can call them together under one umbrella concept as deep ecology arguments. If I can give you 1 or 2 examples of deep ecology arguments, as you know, I'm sure the Uttarakhand High Court decision in recognizing River Ganga as a natural person. I would say that the Uttarakhand High Court decision was kind of unprepared decision from the Indian judiciary, but of course there are similar examples from the other countries, from New Zealand, from the US. If I can quote an example from the US, since 2012-13, an interesting intervention is happening by the court there. One of the animal rights group went to the court with an interesting case. They said that one of the chimpanzees in an American zoo has to be recognized as a human being, because there is not much difference between a human being and a chimpanzee, because the essence of the difference between human being and development of the brain, the ability to think logically. And the main argument of this animal rights group was that the chimpanzees are able to, think logically because they have the brain development that is comparable to the human beings. And of course, the most interesting thing is that the trial court in the US, their chimpanzees can be compared to human beings, and they have human rights. And of course, at the appellate level, it was this judgment of the trial court was quashed. But again, you can see similar deep ecology arguments coming from different jurisdictions. From New Zealand, where the rights of a river was recognized through a statute. Anyway, so when we speak about protection of one of the elements of the sustainable development, it doesn't without balancing the concerns that the human beings face today, it cannot be justified. And there are arguments that favors economic development as well, at the cost of environmental protection. That cannot be justified. It was started, for example, at Stockholm, our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she argued that poverty and means are the greatest polluters. And that was the logic of, that was the logic of the political development of the doctrine of common but differentiated responsibility, as a balance between common responsibility and differentiated responsibility. The developing countries under the leadership of China and India could strike a balance, or could compel the developed countries to strike a balance. And now we have common but differentiated responsibility against a global challenge of climate change. Anyway, all of you are aware of these concepts. So my point is this: it is treating all these elements of sustainable development, the environmental protection, the economic development, and the concerns of social equity has to be treated as integral to each other, not at the cost of another, but together we have to move. And training, teaching, in the classrooms, we need to understand that. Unfortunately, now sustainable development, when we teach about sustainable development, very often we treat it as a part of environmental law. This is wrong. In fact, environmental law or environmental protection, and environmental law as a tool of environmental protection, is one of the aspects of sustainable development, together with economic, the policies and laws relating to economic development, together with the policies and laws aimed at protecting social equity. So environmental protection, or the laws aimed at protecting environment, is a subset of sustainable development, not the other way around. Sustainable development is not the subset of environmental protection. This is one of the errors that we see in the treatment of the subject, that many of us follow in our classroom interactions with our students. And if we look at the sustainable development goals, of course, in 2000, we had the Millennium Development Goals under the leadership of Kofi Annan. And goals were criticized mainly for favoring the global south. And now we have the Sustainable Development Goals running from 2015 to 2030. And we have 17 goals run into 169 targets. And each of these targets are to be measured using indicators, using measurable indicators. And all of us know about Sustainable Development Goals. And in the context of the World Environment Day, in the context of the protection of the theme of this year, that is the protection of biodiversity, and the main intervention in the protection of biodiversity as of today is the climate change. Under this logic, I would request you to, in your classroom interactions and in your professional activities, I would urge you to concentrate on 4 Sustainable Development Goals. The first one is Sustainable Development Goal number 15, life on land. See, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has indicated that diseases can pass from animals to humans. And if we do not take care of our climate, such incidents of human to animal spread of diseases is going to be so common in the future. Degraded habits may encourage more direct animal-human interaction, rapid evolutionary process, and diversification of diseases, as pathogens can spread easily to livestock to humans, and mutations can happen. If media can be trusted, I understand that there are different varieties of COVID-19 viruses present in India. So life on water, life on land, that is one of the Sustainable Development Goals that we have to concentrate in our classroom interactions in the context of the Environmental Day message: protect your biodiversity and take care of your environment, take care of your climate. And the next SDG is goal number 14, life below water. As you know, the ecosystems that sustain and protect life are vital, both on land as well as on water, underwater. Any decline and degradation of the natural marine, coastal, freshwater ecosystems and their biodiversity. When I speak about biodiversity, I include both biotic and abiotic elements, combined with increasing ocean warming, ocean acidification, and widespread pollution. Just think about what will happen to all this pollution masks and the other instruments made of plastic that we have manufactured during this COVID-19 pandemic. After, if at all there is a post-COVID-19 future, what will happen to these plastics? It is definitely going to land up in our nature, including our marine resources, including our oceans. And this plastic waste that land up in our marine resources is it will come back to us through the fish that we eat, through that we collect from various these water resources. So we have to be responsible. We have to take care of the life below water. We have to take care of our the SDG number 14. And the next Sustainable Development Goal that we need to emphasize in our classroom interaction is goal number 12. Goal number 12 is responsible consumption and production. See, we know that consumerism consumes. Any unsustainable production and consumption pattern, of course, we know that it is the result of the privatization and the globalization and liberalization of economic activities. So any such unstable production and consumption, it can lead to, it is scientifically proved that it can lead to depletion of natural resources, because we know that if we can borrow the argument of Plato, Socrates, or Thomas Hobbes, human beings are inherently selfish. So any such consumption patterns can lead to depletion of natural resources, disruption of ecosystems, and this will result in the destruction of our biodiversity. So we need to focus on sustainable development goal number 12 as well. But I'm not suggesting that we need to concentrate on these sustainable development goals at the cost of others. Even the United Nations prescribes that it is our duty as law teachers to treat these sustainable development goals, all these 17 goals and 169 targets, in an integrated manner, not at the cost of the other. Again, the UN also emphasized on reaching the farthest community in remotest parts of the world and take them with us without leaving them behind in our progress towards future. So this is my Environmental Day message, and if I can quote the United Nations, they say that the foods that we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the climate that makes our planet habitable all come from nature. Yet these are exceptional times in which nature is sending us a message to care for ourselves. We must care for nature, that it is time to wake up, to take notice, to raise our voices. It is time to build back. That is better for people and planet. On this World Environment Day, it is time for our nature. So this is my Environmental Day message as a co-teacher. Now, going to the task 2 that is allotted to me. I'm sure you had Professor Bajpai in the morning, and he is an expert in research methodology and in teaching methods, and I'm sure you have benefited from his from his interaction. And I'm sure all of us have learned about different teaching techniques and methods in the past. So I would try to make, we are all peers, and I would try to make an observation from my own experiences, which one is the most suitable, not at the cost of the other teaching methods, but which one is the most suitable method out of all this. Before I raise my opinion on this, let me just let me just give you a brief introduction to this. There is a fundamental difference between environmental law and the other disciplines of law. Environmental law is based on scientific information, scientific evidence. The foundation of environmental law is scientific evidence. And environmental law is highly interdisciplinary. It cannot be discussed maybe as a black letter legal discipline. It has to be studied in the context of international politics. It must be studied in the context of international relations. international trade relations. It must be studied in the context of international economic law and policy. And it is also relevant to study human rights, environmental ethics. So again, it is also relevant to study the scientific, the scientific and technological aspects of the environment. The challenges of environment must be understood in the background of science, the discipline of science and technology as well. It is also important to get into the roots of our society, to understand the concerns of environmental injustice that our people are facing. I'm sure you are aware of the idea of environmental justice, which was for the first time raised in the United States through an article published in Yale Law Journal. Again, when we speak about environmental justice, that is not alien to the scenario in India. Of course, I'll come to that at a later point of time. So my point here is that when we speak about environmental law, it is important that we need we study it, we do the research from an interdisciplinary, from a transdisciplinary perspective. We cannot have a black letter, an isolated approach of studying environmental law and policy. That is my first observation. And second observation is that we have the model curriculum prescribed by our regulatory authorities from the UGC or from from other authorities, saying that, come on, when you offer programs, academic programs in undergraduate level or postgraduate level, these are the prescribed courses, model courses. You have to follow this. And I'm sure national law universities have moved away from this top-down approach in prescribing the curricula. But even today, many of the traditional law schools, take this top-down approach in curricular prescription as God's own words, and they follow it. And the greatest problem with the model curricula is that they prescribe teaching of international environmental law and domestic environmental law as part of the same course. I would say that that is not an ideal situation. Teaching of international environmental law and domestic law, for example, Indian environmental law has to be separated. Let me give you an example why it is important. If I take the principle of precautionary, maybe you'll find the umpteen number of literature which argues that it is too early to call it as precautionary principle. So some of them call it as precautionary approach. So I'm not getting into any of this because all of us know about these debates about precautionary approaches and precautionary principles. Now, what is the difference in international law on the precautionary principle and the position of Indian law on the subject? Now, one of the aspects of precautionary principle in India is that the burden of proof is shifted to the proponent. Suppose, to explain it a bit further, if I'm planning to start an industry, a factory, then it is my duty to prove that with scientific evidence, not with any other evidence. With scientific evidence, I have to prove that it is environmentally safe to continue with my economic activity, with the act of establishing the factory, I'm not going to cause any harm to the environment. It is my duty to prove that. So the burden is shifted to the proponent in Indian law. You can just look at the Value Citizens Forum for that matter. But that is not the position of international environmental law. In fact, in international environmental law, precautionary or precaution is not even recognized as a principle. If you can look at the latest judgment from International Court of Justice, you can look at the Rio Declaration for that matter. But if you look at the latest judgment from the International Court of Justice in the year 2010, the pulp mills case between Uruguay and Argentina, the ICJ has specifically held that the precautionary principle, or precaution is not a principle. It is not. It is still something that can be called as something that can be called as an approach. And the ICJ in pulp mills case has specifically stated that there is no justification for shifting the burden of proof to the proponent. And this is not just an isolated incident. There are many such examples where the principles of international law deviates from what we have learned as details of Indian law, Indian environmental law. When two subjects are different, when we go into the details, when two subjects are different, I fail to understand, at least at the undergraduate level, how they can be clubbed together and they can be taught together. This is one of the challenges that we have as of today, as long as top-down approach in the prescription of the environmental curricula. And see, another challenge that we face as law teachers is that, see, I joined Terry School 2 years ago. And one of the primary question that every student or most of the students raise during the admission stage is that, do we get placement? And that is a common question that all of us face, at least apart from the tier 1 law schools. Most of us face these questions. Do we get placements? And accordingly, we have molded the curriculum. We have emphasized the teaching and the interaction and training more on the commercial law. We teach them, we train them on with more sincerity on commercial legal aspects. Most of the internships are with commercial law firms or maybe with corporate houses. And after their graduation, students look for joining some law firm or maybe some corporate houses. So this is a challenge. This has resulted in treating students as customers and legal education as an industry. What is the nature of industry? We should manufacture marketable products. We should manufacture products that has got the merchantable quality. That is what the Sale of Goods Act says. So we are keen on making the students of a merchantable quality, if I can use this term of the Sale of Goods law. Now, this is another challenge. And another difference between environmental law and the other disciplines of law is, environmental law, though it started its evolution since the since 1970s, maybe, since 1980s, more appropriately. And it started getting recognition as part of academic curriculum throughout, in the universities across the globe during 1990s. I would say that in this short span of time, it has seen both vertical as well as horizontal growth. Vertical growth, if I look at international environmental law, before 1972 Stockholm, there were, if I look at the international multilateral agreements, international environmental treaties, there were very few. I could also argue that there were none that focused on environmental protection. Or safely, I can argue that there were very few. But since 1972, in that Stockholm wave of environmental consciousness, now we have more than 1,000 multilateral environmental agreements, and including bilateral environmental instruments. And apart from that, we have various other international environmental principles that have the status of customary principle. So when we look at the international environmental law, it has seen a vertical growth. And it also has seen a horizontal growth. See, if we look at the international environmental law, we have instruments relating to, general instruments relating to the protection of environment. We have specific instruments in some specific areas. We have the UNFCCC and international instruments specific to protection of climate change. We have the laws of the sea, like various treaties on laws of the sea. We have various instruments on protection of atmosphere. We have various instruments on protection of forests. We have instruments that link economic relations with environmental protection. We have instruments that links, that aims at protecting the polar regions. We have instruments that aims at protecting specific categories, specific species of flora and fauna. So we have seen a horizontal growth in the international environmental law. So is the case with domestic law. We have seen a vertical growth as well as a horizontal growth. If you look at criminal law, for example, of course, criminal law also has grown in the past. But look at the international environmental, Indian environmental law. We have one umbrella legislation, the Environmental Protection Act, and we have specific legislations in the areas of preventing water pollution, air pollution. We have the legislations and various other sources of law on protecting forests, on conserving forest. We have the Forest Regulation, Forest Rights Act. We have various notifications on environmental impact assessment, and we have again one notification is pending, which our government has drafted in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. And we also have legislations and notifications and various other interventions by our executive branch of the government in the area, in the context of environmental protection. And if you look at the environmental protection in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, specifically in the area of environmental impact assessment, some of them were saying that more than 400 notifications have come out in the recent past, and why even even after 20 years, why environmental impact assessment has is coming out to us as a notification? Why not as a specific statute? That is another question. So my argument, my point is that in the recent past, in the last 20 plus years, we have seen a vertical as well as a horizontal growth in the environmental law. Now, this creates a total ambiguity in environmental law teaching in the classrooms. Yesterday, I was having a chat with the Dean, Professor Rashmi. She was telling that very often when we teach water law or the statutes and the case laws relating to prevention of water pollution or air pollution, the classroom interaction becomes a kind of a boring activity. How we can improve on this? And I'm sure you have seen in your last 1 week, you have learned about various techniques of teaching, including case method, including the problem method, collaborative method. You know, there are different methods that we have learned in our as a student as well as a teacher. Interactive method, seminar method, lecture method, Socratic method, clinical method. Thanks to the teacher of all of us, Professor Menon, the outcome-based learning method, the field action research method, or various combination of all these methods. And there are different terminologies used for those combinations. So there are different teaching methods and techniques that we have learned in the past, and all of us have been using these methods in the past. Now, what would be the most appropriate? Sorry, there is a frequent electricity failure, and the AC is not working. So I'm setting. So what would be the method, the technique that I would advise? Again, this is just a suggestion that I have because you are all experienced teachers. A suggestion that I would make before my peers here is, apart from, of course, each of these methods are important, but I would urge you to use the field action research method. It is not necessary that we need to have too many field studies in our classroom interactions. Just choose the most appropriate field study. Let the student visit the field with an approved set of questionnaire. After doing their reading of the secondary and reading of the secondary sources, let them do their literature review and let them analyze the situation. And after that, let them visit the field. Let them understand the ground realities in those situations. I send my students to such field. In the previous semester, I was teaching environmental law and policy for my, of course, I teach for master's students, and I sent my students to for a field study to Java. You know that an airport, a greenfield airport is coming up, is proposed and is coming up in Java, in Gautam Buddha Nagar, and it is going to be, one of the biggest airport in the world with 6 terminals, I guess. And I would just like to share. Srishti, can you just enable my screen sharing?
Yes, we will do. Technical moderator, Mr. Suhas, kindly take care.
Sir, you can share your screen now, sir.
Yeah. So I have sent my students to JVR, and of course, before they went to field study, they have gone through all the secondary materials on on JVR, land acquisition, and on the economic, environmental, and the social justice concerns of land acquisition. And I see any such developmental activities as a sustainable development issue, not just as a developmental issue or not just as a social issue or an environmental issue. So they have gone, they have they did a field study, and they have linked the ground realities in JVR, and they have linked it with the various sustainable development goals. They have linked it with SDG 6, which speaks about clean water and sanitation, and how the ground realities in JVR, is a challenge for the villages, has been a challenge for the villages, and how the scenario is going to improve. So they have, okay, I'm not going to the details of the report. They have linked it with, one second. They have linked it with the ground realities in the field. And earlier I promised you to speak on environmental justice. I have done I have sent my students to JVR as well as to Ghazipur landfill a couple of occasions. And one of the observation, or one of the area that I always ask them to study is the idea of environmental justice, among various other environmental and sustainable development issues. One of them is, I always ask them to study about environmental justice concerns. When I speak about environmental justice, my main concern is that how far the socially and economically deprived sections of our society face the brunt of our so-called developmental activities, or in our intervention, or in our interventions such as Ghazipur landfill. How far the Dalits or the scheduled class and scheduled tribes who are living in the vicinity of the landfill, how their right to life, how their right to clean drinking water, how their right to clean and pollution-free breathable air, how their right is violated. And why use the term environmental justice? This is much important, because why it is always for the socially and economically deprived sections of the society are always at the receiving end. Why not not the other sections of the society, the economically and socially, the so-called forward sections of the society are not at the receiving end. They are always at the beneficial side of the platform. And I have made my classroom interactions more effective when I'm teaching water law, or when I'm teaching the Water Act, or when I'm teaching the Air Act, or when I'm teaching the Environmental Protection Act. I emphasize on sending my students to such field studies, and thereafter I try to teach or try to discuss about these various legislations and the case laws on these legislations before with the students, and I really find it I feel that I could make it really effective, and I have seen that students have been enjoying it. And sorry, I have taken almost 1 hour, and that is my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we can proceed for question answer session, sir.
Yeah, of course, please.
First, I would like to combine two questions. One is from Dr. Rahul Nikam and one is from Richa Srivastava. Both are dealing with the same issue, that is the recent killing of pregnant elephant in Kerala, and then the responsibilities in law.
Yeah, of course, we have we have the cruelty statute that aims at preventing cruelty towards animals. We have a legislation and various other executive orders relating to wildlife conservation, and we have very many judgments from various courts relating to this. The protection of wildlife and animals. I understand that. But again, I would treat this as a challenge of, for law teachers, that we just teach environmental law technically. We have not succeeded in building a culture of environmental ethics among our students. See, our students, they are integral to the society. They are the messengers of the law. They are the messengers of law. Law as a tool of civilization. They are the messengers of law. Unfortunately, I would like to treat it as our failure, the failure of law teachers, because we have not succeeded in creating the sense of environmental ethics among our students. We teach environmental law technically as just as a tool. That's all. So, of course, this is something, the recent incident, it is something that is condemnable. It has to be condemned, and our statutes have remedy for that. And I'm sure the authorities in Kerala will take action against the perpetrators. And I'm sure in my discussions with my students and my colleagues from Kerala, I understand that actions have been already initiated against people who are behind it. But I would like to see that from a larger perspective. Thank you, Srishti.
Sir, Ms. Kanchan Lavanya wants to ask, though we talk about integrated approach, but we generally see economic development versus environmental protection. For example, last year protests broke out in Array Colony in North Mumbai against felling down of trees for car shed construction. How to address such kind of debate in class?
Yes, and this is not so easy. Though we speak on sustainable development, and we speak on balancing of environmental protection and economic development. Somehow it has always remained as one of the toughest questions. And even for judicial forums throughout the world, if you look at the Narmada Bachao Andolan case, this was one of the primary questions that our judiciary had to answer. And I don't know whether the approach of the Indian judiciary on Narmada Bachao case was appropriate, but they said, okay, let us use the utilitarian principle. That of course we know that the construction of or the increasing the height of the dam is going to affect the wildlife. It is going to hamper the forest conservation. It is going to hamper the tribal people in the forests or in the rural Maharashtra and in Gujarat. But it is going to take care of the right to clean drinking water or the water that is required for the developmental activities, and it is going to serve millions of others. So it was kind of counting the heads kind of approach, and I would justify even an utilitarian approach in such similar situations. But that depends on how sincere are we in taking care of the interest of the wildlife in the affected areas. How sincere are we in taking care of the interest of the tribal and rural population, the affected population, when the height of the dam is increased. We have to be sincere in our approaches. We have to have the habit of being genuine to our counterparts. Then we can effectively balance these concerns. Otherwise, of course, it is the economic development that is always going to win, because they have the might of money, and unfortunately, might of money sometimes is going to win always.
Sir Prakhar Pandey is asking, how important is interdisciplinary in teaching of environmental law? Lack of scientific knowledge is a roadblock for most academicians in teaching as well as research. How can one tackle this?
Yeah, hi Prakhar. So I'm happy that you are here. So unfortunately, he is right, and he did his LLM from Theory School, Prakhar Pandey, and currently he is teaching in Presidency University, Bangalore, as assistant professor. He's absolutely, even today, the legal academia in India or maybe elsewhere treat environmental teaching or treat environmental law academic discourses even in that kind of black letter isolated kind of approach. That is one problem. It's a kind of mindset. Second, the other day I had a discussion with discussion in another webinar, and the basic, of course, there was a debate between me and another one participant. It was about the environmental gains of COVID-19 pandemic, and the counterpart on the other side, he was arguing that of course we have an environmental gain because of COVID-19. Then my answer to this argument was that, see, it is not scientifically proved. He said, yes, it is scientifically proved. He indicated certain publications, some research reports which claimed that there has been environmental gains of COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, when we speak about scientific evidence, we take it wrong. By the term science, I mean science, the natural science, the evidence from the that we can prove in the laboratory using statistics, using scientific methods. And unfortunately, when we speak about scientific knowledge or research-based classroom interaction, we misinterpret research, and very often we treat perception-based research as researchers, that is another problem. And of course, the third answer would be we need to be more interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. See, before I go to the class, I'm not a person who is trained in science, but I make sure that whenever in the first few interactions, I invite one of my colleagues who is good at climate science or environmental science to interact with the students, and thereafter my colleague again visit and interact with my students whenever there are questions of scientific knowledge that the students are confused with. So it is important that we either take the help of our colleagues who are trained in environmental science, or we ourselves should get trained in the fundamentals of environmental science. So somehow we have to make it interdisciplinary, without which any classroom interaction on environmental law is going to be a futile exercise.
Sir, can we take 2 more questions if your time is allowed?
Yeah, I can spend up to 3:20.
Just 2 questions. One is from Gunjan Ahuja. She's asking, as a corporate law teacher, how can we include the importance of environmental law and protection of environment along with business laws to the students?
Okay. I would like to ask another question to ma'am, to the madam who asked this question. 2 scenarios. The first scenario, there is one business group or there is one industry, environmental standards for maximization of its profits. Scenario 1. Second scenario, there is another industry So which of these 2 industries are going to make a profit in the long run? Is it the first set of industries or the second set of industries? In my opinion, the first set of industry may make profit in the short run. But in the long run, it is the second category of industries, second category of business that is going to make profits. Again, profit is again a catchy term. Very often we define profit in terms of economics. So profit is something beyond that. It is not just something that can always be calculated. Of course, it is important to calculate profit in economic terms, but it is also to be calculated in terms of human happiness, on the quality of air that we breathe, on the quality of water that we drink. See, all of us calculate the progress in terms of GDP. And Bhutan, our neighbor, our small neighbor, they calculate their progress in terms of gross happiness. I forgot the technical term of that, gross happiness index. And another one more point on the same. I just know I presented 2 scenarios, scenarios of 2 industries. If there are more industries that follow the first pattern, all of us know that climate change is real, and the life, our life is not going to be the same in the future. Of course, we already seeing the pain of it. So it is not going to be the same. We'll have tough time in mitigating the consequences of climate change. So these industries, unless they are sincere in these approaches towards environmental standards in environmental protection, they are going to lose. They are susceptible to changing their business policies so frequently that it will be beyond their environment, beyond their corporate capacity to change it frequently. Again, one more point on this. Of course, we know that the current machinery that we have on environmental impact assessment is a failed one. It has got its own disadvantages, and it is a failed one. I agree on that, because we are all basically greedy. But in the future, maybe the academics have already started discussing about it. In the future, the companies, like now the companies have corporate social responsibility built within the Companies Act 2013. I see that in the near future there will be a stage where even the Companies Act or any statute relating to the corporate governance will have an inbuilt corporate environmental responsibility. I would summarize, I would conclude my response to ma'am that the more we are sincere to the environment, the longer we can strive, we can survive, we can make profits. It is not the other way around.
Thank you, sir. So just last question of the session.
One more example, Srishti.
Sorry,
Volkswagen. I'm sure 4 years ago, you know about how Volkswagen, one of the largest automobile manufacturing company in Germany. I was in Germany. I was a researcher in Max Planck Institute in Germany during those days. So I also used to take classes for MBA at SRH University in Heidelberg. So I mean, many of my students were Germans. So I know like the German sentiments and the sentiments from the students from abroad. Volkswagen, you know what had happened in that incident. Volkswagen was making profit, but some of the misdirected managers of Volkswagen thought that they can make additional profit by diluting or maybe by doing certain nasty technique to their software that reads the pollution in their automobiles, so that the the pollution will be the vehicular pollution will be actually much above the legal standards prescribed by the countries, but the machines will read it as well within the prescribed limit. See, okay, they could make profits for a couple of years, but finally it was detected, and Volkswagen ended up in losing huge share of markets in Europe as well as in the US. But one consequence number one. The consequence number two is they ended up in paying billions, not millions, billions of US dollars as compensation to the affected parties. So they had to pay much more than what they had made as profits by doing this mistake. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Moderator, Srishti. I request that let's stop over here because
Yeah,
Dr. Vishnu,
but,
Dr. Vishnu
ma'am,
has another webinar also.
yeah, Matt,
Uh,
Srishti was mentioning about another question also. Maybe I can take that also.
Okay, Srishti, quickly ask one question. Okay, last.
Sir, there is a question that emergence spread of COVID-19 has highlighted the dangers of people eating wild animals. What is your take on linking COVID-19 and to the wild animals trafficking?
Yeah. I just mentioned about the relevant SDG Sustainable Development Goal. I spoke about life on water, life underwater, life on land, and the misdirected consumerism. I spoke on those issues, how they are going to be a problem in the future unless we take care of the situation.
Thank you, sir.
No, 1 second. I did not answer that. So, Shri, I know that you are in a hurry, but I try to answer that.
Please.
See, when we speak about using of wildlife as for the purposes of food, this is going to be, if I've gone through some of the scientific reports, and if these reports can be trusted, it is going to be a problem in the near future. The instances of zoonosis means the diseases that is transmitted from one species to other species are going to be on the increase, particularly in the context of global warming and climate change. And if I can trust some of the media reports, they also say that that is going to kill a major portion of major chunk of human population. And you can also just look at the origin of malaria or origin of leprosy or origin of AIDS virus. See, all these were zoonoses. The human beings were infected with this virus from wildlife and animals. And we all of us know to what extent smallpox, it was another zoonose. And you know that couple of centuries ago, this smallpox has eaten away maybe more than 10 millions of human beings in Europe. Just think about it. Zoonosis has been always a problem, and it is going to be a problem. And I am a vegetarian, so I believe that I'm safe. Thank you, Srishti. Thank you, Rashmi ma'am.
Thank you so much, Vishnu sir, for your insightful lecture on the topic. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Vishnu, on behalf of the management, on behalf of Professor Venkata Rao, our chairperson, we are extending our thanks to you. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time for all of us. Thank you.
Professor Rashmi, this is my duty as part of this academy, legal academia. And of course, I have my senior, Professor Venkat Rao, though we never interacted. He never taught me. He is my guru. And the chairman of VIPS, Dr. S.C. Watts, he is another legendary figure whom I have a lot of respects. Then, more importantly, we have our Mr. Dilip Kumar here, in VIPS, who is my friend, who was my former boss at Indian Law Institute. So I treat it as my responsibility to come and speak in an event of VIPS. So thank you so much, Professor Rashmi, and all the other organizers for this opportunity. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Yes, Srishti, kindly give us directions for tomorrow, and then we will close the session.
Thank you, Rashmi ma'am. Thank you, all the participants. Now we are winding up for the day. Tomorrow we'll meet at 11 o'clock on the same platform. Thank you so much.